This is Atomic Shinobi and today I am going to narrate second part of What If Naruto Found Legendary Sword of Forgotten Samurai during Forbidden Scroll Incident. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time, let's start the story.
At the bridge. The groups at the bridge continued to struggle to defeat their adversaries, while Haku was slowly attempting to dissect the Uchiha, bit by bit, with bloody flesh in her ice mirrors. Zabuza and Kakashi were engaged in animalistic combat. As all of the blood started to spill onto the bridge, Sakura started to feel sick. Haku cast a dismaying glance at her target. She didn't want to waste time on him. Younger kids who fought harder had been removed by her. He grabbed his head and remained doubled over. As she observed him shake his head, she said, "You should give up. You lack the speed to defeat me." He looked up and avoided her attack, but she sighed and attacked again. Surprised, Haku turned to face the boy, who had red eyes that were being obscured by black. "You have a Kekai Genkai as well?" The Uchiha smirked as he ducked under her next round of attacks. He did successfully kick Haku in the side, sending her flying out of the ice mirror trap she had set. She stood, and he saw her mirrors fall apart. As she started to slowly march at him, he kept smiling until he collapsed, his eyes returning to normal as a result of extreme chakra exhaustion. Haku sighed when he saw how totally outmatched the man was by his own skills. Something was rushing over the bridge at her, so she kept marching. After witnessing his student fall under the Hunter Ninja's attack, Kakashi watched as the ninja proceeded to advance on his student's gravely wounded body. With quick thinking, he launched a multi-fireball attack on the Hunter Ninja. As Kakashi finished, Zabuza noticed the attack and launched an assault, wounding him across the back and sending him flying. He watched as his helpless apprentice was hammered by the attacks. Upon observing the assault, Haku concluded that she could not possibly avoid them all. She straightened and jumped to the side, allowing only two of the masses to strike her. One struck her left side, and the other struck her chest, destroying the fabric until only her soot-covered bindings were visible. At this point, Haku was falling backwards when Naruto reached the bridge. As he noticed her starting to stand up, he came to a halt. From a distance, he could see Sasuke. He saw Sakura sobbing and Junin on their last legs. "Thank God, she is still alive." As he sent a silent prayer, Naruto pondered. Sakura pointed at Haku as soon as she saw him. Naruto glanced at the two, nodded, and went to confront Haku. "Naruto, kill that bitch. She almost killed Sasuke-kun." He kept gaining ground, but Haku saw him at the last second and started using Senbon to fight him off. He whispered to her as he approached her closely enough to grab her by the back of her robe and face-planted her into the ground. She grinned as she threw him and changed while she was in charge of the hold, asking, "Hello Haku-chan. What did I miss?" The faceplant broke her mask, causing it to fall off. She also moved in close and placed a basic hold on his arm. Naruto whirled and placed her in a reverse chokehold, saying, "You were late, but as for that you missed me using my special attack, and beating the Uchiha into the ground." He was thrown away right away, and a Senbon was discovered in his leg. "So by secret technique, and judging by how we met I'm going to guess, you flashed him." She continued to hit him until Naruto's spear tackled her and muttered an apology. She did this repeatedly. Punch, kick, chop, and Senbon. After kicking him in the groin in response, she took his apology. He was in agony, rolling around. Until they heard the sound of breaking ground, they both kept fighting. They turned to see Kakashi holding a lightning bolt and Zabuza restrained by several dogs. As Kakashi charged, Haku realized what was happening and attempted to shove Naruto aside, only to discover him already en route. As Kakashi closed in, Haku cried out, "No," and Naruto swam between them. Zabuza simply stared in disbelief as the boy stood with the hand held away from him, oblivious to the pain as the bolts hit his chest, instantly ending the jutsu. Naruto knew terrible things would happen if he allowed this attack to happen, but he had no idea why he did it. He collapsed as he watched the attack die, screaming in agony as the lightning bolts struck his chest's leather armor. As Kakashi collapsed to a knee from the strain of the attack, Zabuza glanced at the blonde before backhanding him to the side. With a stomp, Zabuza approached the boy, lifted him off the ground, and held him in front of the older ninja. As the blonde gave a feeble giggle, he pulled Kabiri Haucho from behind him and said, "Great move, brat. I am going to kill your dream now, just as I promised." The blonde laughed, but it was quickly overpowered by a much more sinister one. "Go ahead, cut them off. I have something to replace them now. You take away my dream and I will just fight twice as hard to still become a samurai in my own right. So try it, you eyebrow-less demon wood chipper." An army of thugs surrounded a hairy midget wearing a business suit when the ninjas peered out. When he began to speak, Naruto simply ignored him in favor of focusing on Haku. He said, Only for Zabuza to hear, "Your lives are in my debt, you can start to pay it back by making sure you and this big ape don't die today." The boy stood up, facing the mercenary army, after the demon gave him a nod. As Haku brought him his swords and Kakashi stood on his opposite side, Naruto nodded and said, "Kid, I will get my rematch, but it seems that this little bastard was about to cheat us and kill us. So you help me kill him and take his head and I will leave you kiddies and your sensei be." Kakashi nodded at the threat that was revealed in the final sentence. "It seems copy ninja that my employment has been terminated. So we have no more reason to fight, right?" With Gato as the black core, they each took off and started to gradually remove the layers of enemies like an onion. While Zabuza preferred a hack and slash strategy, Kakashi used multiple taijutsu combos to dismantle them, including random decapitation. Flying towards Gato as if his army were made of paper, the Junins demonstrated their titles with ease. Haku and Naruto simply navigated the adversary with accuracy. They danced through the lines, each covering the back of the others. Haku is repeatedly thrown into the air by Naruto so that she can use Senbon barrages to hit the unprepared enemies. They all stood in front of Gato after finishing at the same time as the Junin. He points to the two briefcases, which Naruto cuts the locks off of and Haku inspects while Kakashi has the man paralyzed with terror by the appearance of multiple Kakashi weapons surrounding him. "Wait, Zabuza, we can discuss this, I can give you even more money." Zabuza wipes a swing and shakes his head, then decapitates the little jerk. He turns to go, and Haku picks up the money. But the two pause to observe the brat. He points to a blushing Haku and says, "We will meet again, brat," which is if she has anything to say about that. As Naruto glanced at Haku, Kakashi nodded. He took the kunai he had used to frighten Inari out of his pocket and gave it to her. He gave it to her and said, "To remember everything I did for the pair of you." Zabuza nodded and reached for it, but Haku grabbed it, put it away, and then slapped him over the head. Then, as Kakashi turned to face his other students, he saw a veritable army of villagers appear behind them, and the two vanished. As he did so, Naruto picked up a tiny piece of white bone that had previously made up a larger portion of Haku's mask. He turned to see Kakashi staring at him, and tucked it into his haori. Furiously, the pervert said, "Naruto, you have some explaining to do?" The blonde said, nodding. As he left to find a nap spot, Naruto remarked, "I met the bastard the same time you did. As for the girl, I guess she just liked me for some reason, probably my coat. Why the hell is it always me who gets the one no one understands?" Kakashi thought as he gazed at the blonde. "I must be hated by Kami." As the missing ninja pair watched the scene from atop a crane and then vanished in an equal amount of water, he simply walked away. While sitting on his front porch, Naruto dutifully observed the Anbu patrolling his property. As the Anbu passed one another with hardly a greeting to break the boredom he had rightfully, or, in his view, wrongly, instilled in himself, he sighed once more. What could have caused the blonde to be in such a bad mood and justify the Hokage's Anbu patrolling his grounds? Because of his actions during the most recent mission to the Nation of Wave, he was placed under house arrest with the strictest restrictions. Two missing ninjas had attempted to forcibly remove his team from Konoha's ninja roster with his help and encouragement. In hindsight, his current situation resulted from his sensei of the team publicly discussing his actions with the Sandame. He reflected in silence on his encounter with the council and how the Hokage had treated him so leniently. A flashback. Naruto glanced up at the benches containing the village's most potent figureheads. The leaders of different ninja clans, the Hokage and his associates, an elderly warmonger that only Danzo knew, and the more powerful individuals who oversaw the daily affairs of the civilian populace were all present. He glanced around the room, seeing everything he knew. His master, Sarutobi, was clearly in charge of overseeing the action. On either side of him were his teammates Homura and Kaharu-san. Danzo, the head of the Root Anbu division, occupied the first seat in the row above. The heads of the clans then filed in. Beside the Anbu head were the original trios of Ino, Shika, and Sho. Sume Inuzuka, the leader of his former classmate Kiba's clan, occupied the last seat in the row. Her canine companion sat on the floor next to her, apparently sleeping. Hiyashi Hyuga, the head of the Hyuga clan, began the next row. Next was Shibi Aburame, who was possibly the only clan leader he knew personally outside of his master. The leader of the clan that typically produced the best trapmakers in the village, Haganoshi Kai, came next. Since neither Uchihas nor Senjus remained to perform clan duties, the next two were left empty. The blonde thought he saw a head of pink from the very last row, but the next 3 rows were empty of people who were important to him. The man known as Homura looked at the boy and said, "Naruto Uzumaki, present ninja of Konoha, residing rank being genin." You have been brought before the council of the village to clarify your actions on your previous mission to Wave Country. Samurai, was the blonde's only answer. Koharu questioned, what was that? As Sarutobi raised his voice. Homura nodded, located the paper, corrected his error, and went on, saying, Naruto is of the samurai profession and his file holds a changing to him of profession to a later date. As he read the report to the blonde seated a few feet ahead of him, the man said, you have been referred by your team sensei, one Hitaki Kakashi, for acts of insubordination and alleged betrayal and desertion towards your team and by extension the village on said mission. Is this correct, Uzumaki-san? Naruto shook his hands, indicating the chakra cuffs he wore, and said, I suppose when you put it that way I kind of sound like a major criminal. But even so are these. The blonde simply shrugged and replied, I suppose when you put it that way I kind of sound like a major criminal. The room agreed that this was a bit drastic, and since he was unarmed, they let his arms go free. The blonde simply sat there with his arms and wrists whilst cut by the cuffs. Koharu kept rubbing his wrists and said, now Naruto-san about the charges presented? He started to feel his circulation return, and he nodded. I did partake in actions that would match that description as I was away from my team for the duration of the stay as to better train myself. I did not follow the orders of Kakashi as they clashed with the orders that I had been given in the originality of the mission. As for the betrayal, that is a much longer and sorer subject. The blonde responded as he rested his elbows on his knees and raised his fingers. Some of the council members frowned as their mountain of incriminating evidence was reduced to a much smaller portion. Sarutobi said, well, Naruto has been given permission by me to practice his skills to better perfect them, so that cancels out the charge of desertion. Naruto nodded. Homura sat down and concluded, the orders of insubordination was to be addressed. Next, Koharu. Chan, you have the floor. She took out an original copy of the contract and said, yes, Naruto-san, you say that your insubordination was in light that it conflicted with the contract that had been drawn out in the original mission, how so? As he fingered a small cut in his haori, Naruto stated, the mission was classified as a low C class, which as we entered Wave Country borders, rapidly raised to an A class due to the involvement of two high-ranking missing ninja. The council shied away even more as their collected evidence dwindled to its final and most desperate act. Kakashi has also verified the encounter of two missing ninja ranging from A to B class on the mission in his report, and as such Naruto is cleared in his charges of insubordination as well. Koharu then sat while Sarutobi stood. While standing there and observing his blonde subordinate, the Hokage said, Naruto, your last charge is of betrayal. How do you explain this action? Naruto was about to continue when he was interrupted by a glare from Hiyashi and a laugh from the Inuzuka head. I cannot clarify that, as the act of betrayal is of emotional and personal relation and I cannot express clear views. I have only to say that I tried to seek diplomacy instead of the time-honored ninja approach of just upping and blasting every little offensive against my person. Naruto bowed his head in response to the Hyuga's statement that, you would not do very well to undermine ninja in the presence of a council held in the power of mostly veteran ninja young Uzumaki. After that, Sarutobi went on to discuss the problem. The blonde's master questioned, Naruto, you mentioned that you tried diplomacy, how exactly? I tried to sway the missing pair to join the village under the protection of said village, but we were cut off in the negotiations by the arrival of the corrupt shipping mogul, and a standing force of over 50 armed mercenaries. We dealt with the head of the shipping corporation and his attacking force, but they showed no interest in allegiance and took their payment from deceased mogul and left. He responded by leaving a number of incriminating proof exposed. Danzo wanted to place the blame on the boy, so he asked, what of the head of this corrupt shipping mogul, where is it? Naruto started to concentrate on his steeple hands and uttered the words, the head is in possession of said missing ninjas. The root leader said, you did not bring the head back as evidence? Enough, Danzo, we have evidence from the bridge builder that matches the blonde's chain of events. He was not entrusted by anyone to return the head to this village. Sarutobi said as he finished. Danzo said, very well. He was literally furious that he had not been given a better opportunity to use the accumulated evidence to recruit this Jinchuriki as a weapon for his forces. Sarutobi then gave the floor to the other council members so they could decide on a punishment while Naruto remained seated and watched the proceedings. That all leaves to announce the punishment of Naruto for his actions with the missing ninjas. Let's hear the council's opinions. Looking up, the elder council requested the civilian council's decision. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the pink-haired woman who represented the civilian council and said, our verdict is death to the little demon Hokage. Sama. It seems a bit excessive for such a minor act, doesn't it, councilwoman? As the Hokage answered, Naruto pondered. Death was the only appropriate punishment for the demon brat's crime, according to the civilian council, which cried out, denied. He has not broken any of our standing dissentents, so in the saying the punishment does not fit the crime. Shinobi Council, you have the floor. Hiyashi guided their opinions and represented the Shinobi Council. The Elder Council nodded, and Sarutobi pounded his gavel. The Shinobi Council chooses 1 month of house arrest so as to prove that under Anbu guard he doesn't meet up with the escaped missing ninjas. Sarutobi then raised his hand, and it was complete as the Anbu led him out. Agreed with Shinobi Council's verdict. Uzumaki Naruto, you will be under house arrest for 1 month with maximum restrictions on everything except visitors that are approved by at least 3 members of this council. The end of the flashback. As a result, he was only welcomed by 2 groups of people 12 days into his sentence. The Konohamaru Corps and Shibi and his son Shino, who had come to see the new flowers Naruto was growing. He was unaware of how they obtained the aforementioned documents. He was eternally thankful that he had managed to evade the villagers and his team, who were forced to complete D-rank missions without him. Cleaning, fixing, and preventing the sisters from destroying his house during their more frequent arguments over something neither they nor Gurren Sensei would let him know about had taken up the days. Hearing a slam, he turned to face the house, and when he heard Shinobu scream, he leapt to his feet. He simply waved and walked slowly back into his house as the Anbu turned to face him. When he got inside, he noticed that the girls were fighting like never before. Tables were flipped over, his seat cushions were all over the place, and his knife block's contents were being thrown all over the place. An incense burner flew over his head and slammed into his door, causing it to shut as he fell to the ground. He was on the floor when he noticed Gurren Sensei hiding atop his bookcase, making a valiant effort to remain hidden from everyone. He glanced at the turtle, who simply said, "It's your house," and gestured around the room. With a sigh, Naruto got to his feet just as his ear popped from a cleaver that had flown into the wall next to it. Yay, it feels like I'm back in Wave. He got to his feet as Cayenne attempted to kick Shinobu with a flying kick. Unfortunately, she overshot and fell into Naruto's embrace. She points to her sister, who was taking knives from the wall, and says, "Naruto-kun, you have got to help me, that woman. It's completely nuts." She yells as a knife flies at them, and she jumps away as it pierces Naruto's chest. As he removed it from his armor and placed it on an end table lacking 2 legs, he gazed down at it. What in the Kami's domain? They destroy the house after I'm only outside for 1/2 an hour. As he grabbed the girls who were about to fight in front of him and dragged them apart, Naruto thought. The sisters sat in front of him, pushing each other with their shoulders as he asked, "Okay, what is going on? More importantly, what did my house do to deserve this?" When Naruto turned to face his sensei, he drew his head back into his shell. Coward. The sister then looked up at him after ceasing to fidget. As Naruto noticed the girl's sensei trembling in his shell, Shinobu remarked, "Well, Naruto-kun, we saw a message bulletin in town that was advertising the end of the summer festival. They said that there was going to be games, and food, and shows of skill, and dancing. So we immediately were caught up in who you would be taking, and we said some things that the other didn't appreciate," Cayenne replied. Shinobu became enraged at this and responded with equal vigor, "She called me an uneducated bimbo." Their words, or more specifically, their voices, irritated Naruto's poor ears, causing him to wince. "You called me a distressed concubine? Lucky little bastard probably has soundproofing seals on the shell," he said, observing his sensei unaffected. He was about to speak when they started tackling and exchanging more offensive remarks. The doorbell diverted his attention just as he was ready to stop them. Ignoring the outburst of tempers behind him, he cracked open the door and saw an unlikely face. That blonde academy girl was the one. "What is her name?" "Ino." "That's it, Ino." The sound of glass smashing and crashing interrupted him as he asked, "What can I do for you, Ino?" Upon turning around, he saw that Cayenne had flung his china cabinet at her sister's head. As he turned back to face the blonde, he noticed that she was attempting to look past him. She pouted as he shut the door a bit more. "What is it you need, Ino?" There was another crash, then the sounds of thumps on wood, and she turned to face the area behind him. "It's great that they're tossing my kitchen tools once more." The cries of "bitch" and "whore" echoed through the air as he went outside and shut the door. Ino turned to face the boy who seemed to have a horde of angry women behind his house, and to make matters worse, she didn't even recognize any of the voices. She pointed to the door and demanded, "What is going on in there?" He simply shook his head and shrugged. As he crossed his arms and grabbed the wood axe the Konohamaru Corps had left by the doorway from their chores, he demanded, "My roommates are a little violent when they disagree now, what do you want?" Ino glanced at the axe he was holding and instantly questioned whether confronting him would be a wise move. That axe did appear sharp, and he wasn't the least strong person in the academy. In fact, he placed fairly high in that category. He simply ran his thumb along the edge of the axe, assuming it would need to be sharpened later before he allowed Udon to do any more work with it. "I heard that you insulted Sasuke-kun, and I demand that you apologize," she said in her own brand of righteousness. As her face began to heat up, Ino simply glared at the other blonde and asked, "Which time do you want me to apologize for? And will a letter of leave me alone suffice instead?" When Ino screamed, the Anbu at the gate turned to stare in shock. "You should be stumbling over your feet trying to apologize to Sasuke-kun for what you did. He is the genius of our class and he is more than capable of beating you. After all, he is from the Uchiha clan and they helped found the village." With his head in his hands, Naruto pondered in private why he and the other gender could never coexist in harmony. "Ino, I really don't care who my supposed teammate is. He is still just as arrogant as he was in the classroom. As for him beating me, we have yet to see who would win because neither of us would go all out, as he thinks I am unworthy and I promised not to outside of battle. As for the Uchiha clan, they are not something to be proud of." Ino stared in disbelief as Naruto made it and put down his blade. He stepped toward her and said, "The Uchiha are honorless," which made her retreat. "Indecent, one more move. Cowardly thieves who steal from their allies as well as their enemies. Sasuke is no exception. The only decent Uchiha were the ones who didn't have that damnable eye and worked for what they did. Those Uchiha have died out, and even before that they were few and far between in that clan. If Sasuke were anything like them and didn't rely on his eyes to get him through every little battle, he might be worthy of the ridiculous praise you, Sakura, and the rest of his fangirls so blindly heap upon him. But until he loses those eyes or he learns humility, I will not apologize, understood? Good, you know where the gate is. You can spread this message to the other fangirls as well. If the even slightest sight of a fangirl about to berate me." He picked up the axe and tossed it across the yard to lodge in a stump near the woodpile, while Ino watched. He glared at her as he turned back to face her. Ino paled as she stood and fled as if the flames of hell were following her. "I am afraid that there will be no more loyal Uchihas to the village, and your last big fangirl meeting will require you to come in black." Then, with a sigh, Naruto collected himself and proceeded to resolve his other female issue. After 7 days, Naruto returned his remaining books to the shelves that had been fixed. In order to resolve the issue, he informed the girls that he was still under house arrest and would not be attending the festival. Additionally, he was relieved that he was spared the burden of having to choose between the two. To help them unwind, he had told them they could go. However, this meant they had to go together, which worried him a little. Naruto had been cleaning the house when they left an hour ago, when they had assumed he would be sleeping. A knock on the door signaled that he was finally done. 2 Anbu were standing at his door when he opened it. He went outside after they nodded. One walked away, and he waited. As the Anbu departed, Naruto nodded and observed the Anbu go. "Naruto-san, I have allowed you to be up to date on the postings of the guard around your compound. This is just letting you know that I am retiring for the night." Standing on the porch, he observed the 2 Anbu observing him from the gate. After bowing, he entered. His gaze wandered to the house. It was a very overwhelming experience for him to be in the house alone for the first time. With a sigh, he moved to the cabinet where he stored some of his possessions in. He took out the box that Lena had given him so long ago. He gazed in awe at the box. Since being placed under arrest, he had personally spent every moment of his free time in this box. He gazed at the finished swallow design in a wintry scene. He found the groove and pried it open by running his hand along the edge. There was a silk cushion inside. There were 2 ornaments on the cushion, each about the size of a large pebble, hanging on a sturdy black chain. One of the decorations was a gold cast sun encircled by a strange red stone he had never seen before. The other ornament was a silver cast quarter moon with blue stones that he believed to be sapphires, but he had never seen one to compare it to, so he wasn't positive. When he raised the chain to examine it, he discovered that it was made up of 2 distinct chains, one for each ornament. As he made his way to his bedroom, he grinned. He opened the door and entered. He proceeded directly to the stand and unlocked it. Inside, in a long redwood box the size of a large picture frame, he stored his mementos. He had never allowed anyone to see it so they could make fun of him. There were a number of objects inside that each represented a different period of his life. His first weapon was a shuriken with dents in the edges and metal fragments falling off. The next image featured him grinning alongside 2 individuals wearing chef's uniforms at a ramen stand in the background. He discovered that he was holding the fox after seeing a piece of paper that contained a portion of a seal array. Then came a few coins from various locations he had dreamed of seeing as a child. His favorite childhood tale of the Sandame defeating the Naidame Tsuchikage in the Third Great Shinobi War was contained in a set of scrolls that were rolled up at the bottom. The shard of Haku's mask in Wave Country was the final item. For him, this box was very important. It was his most powerful link to his history. He felt it would be appropriate to include the 2 ornaments as well. He also set the box there, beside the redwood box. Then he heard the gentle click of it catching as he closed it. Then he slid the key under his right forearm guard, where it was hidden. Then, without noticing his sensei in the shadows, he left the room. To make a cup of tea, Naruto entered the kitchen. He took the kettle out and got going when he heard a faint noise coming from the window. A black messenger bird was pecking at the glass when he looked at it. He let it in by opening the window. It landed on the handle of one of his pots after flying to the counter. He looked inside and discovered a tiny scroll encircling the bird's leg. He unfolded it and started reading the 2 distinct scripts. A larger one that left indentations on the page, and a smaller, more orderly one. Dear Gaki, I am writing to inform you that we have temporarily sought asylum in Demon Country. In return for protecting a high-ranking local official with the ruler of the Land of Wind, we have been granted sanctuary. When we go back into hiding, we won't be able to send as many messages, so whether you like it or not, we're sending one now. You won't have to worry about me removing your arms the next time, but I still want to rematch. After all, it's difficult to find a good sparring partner, and not many fight at the level we do. Therefore, keep in mind that we will notify you when we plan to take action. Thus, avoid trouble. If you find yourself in a situation where you have taken on more than you can handle, please send us a message. Until I attempt to decapitate you again, of the Momochi, Zabuza. At the bottom of the page, Naruto saw Zabuza's letter and chibi, which was giving him the finger. That such a strong swordsman would behave like a child made him look disapproving. Then he started reading the insert from Haku. Dear Naruto.kun, I am writing to you from a small village where Zabuza has reportedly been able to secure employment by threatening to fire a man if we don't hire him and killing all of his former bodyguards. We are hiding in plain sight and are safe. As soon as the mist ninjas discover our presence, we will have to hide. We will politely accept the man's hospitality until then. Hopefully, you will be able to meet us in Snow Country when we visit there in the spring. Zabuza neglected to mention that this is a chakra bird, but we look forward to seeing you again. It is trained so that no one notices. It allowed us to get in touch with you without causing you any problems with your village. If you received the message, reply. We both had a great time in Wave, though Zabuza won't admit it. With a lot of affection, the Momochi's Haku. Naruto gave himself a nod, comprehending how the bird managed to evade the Anbu. He took out a sheet of paper from a ledger and completed it. Zabuza.san and Haku. Chan, I got your letter, and if it works out, I'll try to see you too in the spring. I'll come to spend time with you too and bring new challenges. Because I allowed myself to assist the 2 of you in Wave, I am currently under house arrest. Until our next meeting, Uzumaki. Naruto. The bird instantly flew out the window and into the sky after Naruto gave it to it. He turned to face Gurren Sensei, who was sipping a cup of tea with that tiny paper umbrella and straw he so adored, after watching it vanish beneath the clouds. As he sipped his tea, the turtle asked, so you will keep in contact with them, even when we are in the opposite side of a charging cavalry? Naruto sipped his own tea while seated across from his sensei. He considered his future while glancing at his sensei. It would not be simple. Gurren Sensei, I can't write them off if they are missing ninja. I have already found interest in one and the other may be the closest I can find to teaching is how to wield another weapon. I will not throw away my friendships for the stupidity of the village. Naruto said while his sensei was still sipping his coffee. The turtle glanced at the blonde and said, that is so, I do approve and the sisters will undoubtedly agree as well. You will need to prepare yourself though. I sense many challenge ahead of you, and you cannot surpass them with your present skills. So I will teach you the offensive officer skills, and the higher levels as well as let our friend Palm know that we are going to begin your studies of basic sealing. Naruto glanced in the direction where the bird had vanished and nodded. He would need to gain strength. A person who was unable to defend their friends and loved ones could not be considered weak. As soon as they managed to contact Palm, he would begin. He groaned as he watched the Anbu guards move past one another. With these Anbu here to observe and report everything I do to the council, there is nothing I can do. I will have to wait. As he left the table to meditate and better center himself, Naruto wished his sensei well. Gurren was shocked to see the clouds simply gaze down and guard the village as he watched his apprentice leave. There are moments when I wish I had only intended to train 10 disciples rather than 100. As he sat there thinking about what his family would be doing, the old turtle thought, honestly, how in the blue hell am I supposed to keep up if they are all going to turn out like the sisters and this boy? I am a turtle for God's sakes. An excerpt from events that were not posted. Sitting in their apartment, Zabuza and Haku read the blonde's response. After completing his reading, Zabuza turned to Haku. "Does that brat's last name really mean fishcake?" he inquired, recalling his former swordsman partner Kisame Hoshigaki, who had a shark-like appearance. When Haku heard her master's question, she simply slapped her face. She turned back to the letter and remarked, "Zabuza. Sama, it's Uzumaki, not Uzumaki. It means that it's maelstrom." He winced as he awaited the onslaught of Senbon. "Yeah, right. I bet you just want it that way so that when you bed him you can brag that he lives up to his name." She was lying unconscious from a terrible nosebleed when he turned around. When the girl reacted, Zabuza roared, "Ha ha 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 ha." Unfortunately, his laughter was too loud, waking the ice user, who then aimed Senbon at his happy place while she struggled with a severe case of blushing. As she began approaching his targets, she was oblivious to her master's cries until he departed by shushin. She muttered to herself, "Not that I would mind." In the village, concealed among the leaves, Naruto was asleep when he felt an unusually cold chill run down his spine. He simply sat up, rubbed his eyes, and pondered. "I'm going to have a bad experience. I am aware of it." Sasuke-kun, after training, would you like to go out for some food? HNN, was her response. The pink-haired girl deflated when the Uchiha looked at her and shook his head once. "Is that a yes?" he asked. After glancing up from his book to observe the two, Kakashi turned to face his other teammate. The blonde was reserved, which makes sense given that he had just been released from house arrest a few days prior. But it didn't appear that his isolation had been shattered in the slightest. If anything, he was dead to the world because he could not detect the slightest hint of emotion coming from the blonde. Returning his attention to his book, Kakashi reflected on the things he had learned about his team during his midnight espionage missions. Since Sakura had shown herself to be essentially unchanged from her time with the team, there was no justification for further invasion of her privacy. Sasuke had been unexpected in that he had undoubtedly paid someone to maintain the cleanliness of the entire compound. Before training, dinner, and bedtime, the young prodigy personally inspected every room to make sure nothing was missing from before the massacre. As he glanced over his shoulder at the blonde, Kakashi thought, "Overall, most of my team seems to be well planned and normal, except for the little from the blonde that I have seen." The blonde, who seemed to be examining the surface his bandaged feet were walking on, showed no response. Because the blonde was somewhat extrasensory to his surroundings, Kakashi was unable to see into half of the rooms after Naruto's recon. He had only observed the interior of his home, and the blonde's bedside table was one of only 2 locked items in the whole house. The other was a big cabinet in the hall closet, which was much more secure than half the house. Kakashi looked again and saw that the little blonde had stopped and was observing a messenger hawk. What could he be hiding so well, that he doesn't want anyone to know about? He asked. Kakashi looked at the messenger hawk and knew instantly that it was a summons for the Junin senseis to the Hokage's office. The two in front of him turned to face him and said, "Team change of plan," while the person behind him simply started to leave. Kakashi held up the entrance papers and said, "Naruto, you will need to help your team with this. After all, they can't become Chunin without your help." As he turned to leave, Naruto declared, "I will not take this exam, which would mean I am a ninja. You will have to find a replacement." Kakashi suddenly materialized in front of him, stopping him. There was no smile on the Cyclops' face. Naruto looked up at the Junin, and Kakashi noticed the blonde's hand straying to his swords right away. "Your charade is not funny anymore, Naruto. You will help your team or we will get an express order from the cage saying you have to participate." As he attempted to move away from the obviously irritated Junin, Naruto remarked, "That is reason enough for me to promise you I will never take that exam. I do not wear this headband on my arm for ninja rank. I wear it to show my loyalty to the Sandaime. Now move aside, I could be using this time to train in my new attack." "That is enough!" exclaimed Kakashi, grabbing the blonde's arm but releasing it when 3 senbon pierced his glove. Taking the blonde by the shoulder, he wheeled him to face him while snarling. There was a big puff of smoke as they said, "We are going to get this mess out of your head and straighten this out once and for all." Since the Junin had vanished from view, Naruto was still there even though Kakashi had left. After brushing himself off and beginning to move away, he was instantly engulfed in another puff of smoke and watched Kakashi seize him before vanishing with a much stronger hold. The Junin were filing out when Naruto returned to the Hokage's office. Sandaime sighed inwardly as she saw the two. As Kakashi approached the desk, the Hokage said, "Hello Kakashi-san. I understand why you are here and I appreciate you bringing our blonde swordsman with you as I needed to speak with him. This doesn't however explain why you have brought him here." Hokage. "Sama, we need you to tell Naruto that he is going to have to take the exam with his teammates so that they can continue onward. Before the Junin was done, Sarutobi glanced at the blonde who was simply sitting on the couch and shaking his head. As the cycloptic ninja turned to glare at the blonde, he simply cleared his throat. Naruto was observing the elderly man who had just revealed information he was unaware of. Kakashi, Naruto is going to be away for the first 2 tests of the Chunin exam. I have already signed on a replacement that is about your team's skill levels. His name is Sai. He will be there the day of your team entering the exam. So this is the end of that. Sandaime shook his head and spoke to the Junin, saying, "But Hokage Sama, I must press the request that my team will be uneven with both of his other teammates being Chunin, and him still a Genin. Naruto is not a ninja Kakashi, he does not need to nor is he allowed to partake in the exam. He is a samurai who is under my order and was only placed on your team till you have one of your students reach Chunin, where you would then go to another active branch of service, more than likely the daimyo's military in the capital. So I am inclined to dissertate to your request." The Junin was simply perplexed. "Means no," they both said as they turned to see the blonde samurai leaning back and performing a complex dance with a senbon twirling between his right hand's fingers. To the Junin's ire and the Hokage's amusement, he glanced up at the two and waved. The Junin nodded and vanished in the same manner as he had appeared. "That is all, Kakashi-san. Please leave while I breach the blonde swordsman on his mission." After getting up from the couch, Naruto moved to the chair facing his master and took it. Up the sleeve of his haori, the senbon he was spinning had vanished in a flash. "Good afternoon, Naruto. As we both know, you will not be taking the upcoming exam. However, I have received a message that implied that I send you to the capital because the daimyo has someone who, along with himself, would like to meet you. The message was delivered while you were on the wave mission, but it had to be postponed until you returned, and regrettably postponed again because of your recent incarceration in your own home. It can no longer be postponed, and you will depart tomorrow at noon. Once you arrive in the capital, you will stay for a week before reporting back. Is this understandable?" Naruto nodded as another senbon emerged from his coat sleeve. The Hokage was immediately drawn to the dark coloration of the senbon, which was different from the typical steel one. The Sandaime leaned forward and listened intently to the samurai's response. "Now that the official business is over, I would like to ask you some questions of late. One is that I must know what these techniques are that you have been practicing in the training grounds that do so much damage." The old man nodded and moved on to his next query. "I am practicing my offensive skills that invoke more of my energy than my ordinary sword techniques and require more space, which is all I can say for right now, Hokage Sama." He sighed as he watched the senbon stop spinning and fly into the other hand between his fingers, where it was easily caught. "Your actions in teaching the Konohamaru Corps fighting techniques have reached the council and they wish to know why you did not teach the same techniques to Uchiha Sasuke when he forcefully asked about them." The blonde flicked the senbon back to his original hand and said, "I did not teach Sasuke-san because he was an unbearable pain in my hind unmentionables." The blonde nodded as the senbon vanished up his sleeve once more. "Okay, that makes sense. Now, this last item is much more interesting to me. When did you add senbon needles to your expanding arsenal of weapons?" Then he showed him what they had been concealing by pulling up the sleeves of his haori. When Sarutobi noticed what was clearly a rectangle fastened to the blonde's arms on the other side of his forearm so as not to obstruct the blonde's armor, his brow wrinkled. He gave the blonde a sidelong glance so he could finish explaining. "These are multiple holders for senbon, they hold 15 apiece. They allow 5 to be drawn manually as the others are fired by the process of bending my hand a certain way as to cause the veins in my arm to activate the switch pressed against my skin. Here is a demonstration." In order to simulate pointing in front of him, Naruto extended his hand, bent his ring and pinky, straightened his middle and pointer fingers, and then slowly raised his thumb from his hand. Suddenly, a faint sound of air escaping could be heard, and 3 senbon pierced the Hokage's desk with unexpected force. With the exception of adding your middle finger to your outstretched pointer finger, the hand sign essentially consists of making a gun with your hand. The Hokage turned to face the weapon in shock and amazement. If I'm not mistaken, that small gadget is around 2 years ahead of the market for senbon launchers. It's absolutely amazing that this small marvel was made right in front of me. Naruto spoke during this moment since he had the Hokage's undivided attention. He placed a package wrapped in rice paper, and the Hokage stared at the blonde bewildered until he tapped the senbon launchers and gestured to the desk. The Hokage opened it right away and saw another pair, which he then fastened to his own forearms without realizing the blonde had smiled. After giving it a try, he discovered it was far more powerful than he had thought. As the Anbu concealed in the room gazed at the weapons with interest, he gave a nod to the boy who grinned. The blonde nodded and snapped his hands, sending 4 senbon flying into his waiting hand. "Naruto, Could you perhaps now explain these senbon that you use, as they are obviously different from original other utilize? He nodded as the Hokage opened the container and gave the boy the mixed metal senbon, saying, "These senbon are not custom, just old. They are originally made of a mixture of copper and iron ore, which if they pierce the skin will cause just as much trouble as if they were steel coated in something." The Hokage stopped the blonde from accepting them by pointing out that not everyone should be aware of the boy's tricks. The Hokage then excused Naruto in order to examine these weapons in greater detail. As he asked a question he hadn't considered, he stopped the blonde at the door. The blonde turned to the Hokage as he was leaving the room, grinning. "Naruto, why senbon? You could have gone to a more silent weapon that a samurai utilized, such as a kusari, gama, or a spear." The Hokage laughed like a monster as the blonde departed to prepare for his journey, saying, "That Hokage sama is my own way of respecting a woman who has quite literally put my face in the dirt." As the blonde stepped out into the street below, Sarutobi glanced at the door and then out the window. "I hope you will pardon me for sending you to meet him, Naruto. However, he is the last member of your family known to be alive." Next day at Naruto's house, the sisters stared at Naruto bewildered as he hummed, unless he was learning a new sword technique, enjoying a good day with them, or getting along with Gurren. "Sensei." The blonde was never this joyful. What had transpired then? Naruto picked up 2 sets of clothes and stuffed them into a hiking pack that was full size. After that, he removed the box from his dresser, sealed it so that it could not be opened until he got back, and put it back on his dresser. He then proceeded to acquire items that most people wouldn't bring on such a journey. A big pot that hung from the side of his pack, along with a few kitchen tools. A moderate quantity of food to last him the entire journey to his destination. Then he brought along a big oilskin to serve as a rain cover. Next, he took a traveling staff from the door, which Gurren Sensei had fashioned for him out of a rosewood tree. This would serve as his mission training, focusing so intently on the heel technique that it would explode on top in a blossoming form. After placing his pack on the floor, he put on the 2 items he had left in mind. He put on a huge black cloak with a high collar that reached his mouth, along with a big, brimmed rice gatherer's hat from which he hung a tiny, calm symbol. After getting dressed, he turned to go, only to turn around and confront the sisters. With his arms extended as though to embrace, he asked, "How'd I look?" The responses caught him off guard. While Cayenne was grinning and resisting the impulse to appear as though she was screaming in terror, Shinobu simply nodded her head feebly and turned away. When Gurren Sensei entered, he turned and reacted with astonishment. With the words, "Back, you evil devil. I will not allow you to enter this house of my disciple," he shrank to the size of a couch and started throwing green energy in his direction. "Sensei, calm down, it's me," Naruto said, removing the hat. The turtle instantly stopped, and Naruto became horrified to see the floor surrounding his sensei start to recover from the severe burns. While tearing off the boy's cloak and throwing it into the fireplace, his sensei screamed, "Naruto? Why in the Golden Gates of Kami are you dressed like an invader of the north?" Since it was gone, it instantly caught fire. Raising his hands, Naruto prayed that his sensei wouldn't also burn his hat to nothing. His sensei groaned and tossed the boy a brown cloak made of lighter material, saying, "Sensei, I was just trying to dress as an inconspicuous traveler." The sisters and sensei were far more grateful for this look, which was the same one Naruto was aiming for. They were all standing in the living room when the turtle called, "Well?" Naruto shook his head and gave his friends an explanation of his mission and destination. "Where are you going? Is it to those 2 from that wave country?" he asked. Gurren did not respond to the girl's exclamations of delight at finally visiting a far-flung location. What would cause his nation's leader to address him or even pay him a visit? As the girls entered their sealed states, Gurren thought, "I don't like this. I feel that whatever this is will hurt the boy much more than anything else that has happened." As they walked out of the house, he nodded and leapt up onto the boy's shoulder. On the streets, Palm was being ridden by Naruto as they rode through the village to the gate. He had chosen not to use the summon's special ability during the trip because he was so happy to be spending time with Palm. Right now, he was passing by the Hokage Tower in the central district before waving at the elderly man's window to let him know it was him and heading out. As he proceeded through the village, he received a lot of strange looks, but as he approached the clan houses, almost no one was around. Palm whinnied and stood on his back legs as he pondered the purpose of his mission. As instructed by the sisters, Naruto simply tightened his hold on his thighs and turned to see what was causing the commotion. Konohamaru and his companions were fleeing from a furious Sakura who was yelling that her head was the perfect size for Sasuke. As he left with the appearance of assisting the undiplomatic boy, Naruto nearly released a drop of perspiration that would have knocked both him and Palm to the ground. He was following him when the whole group erupted in a cry of fear, and he took off at a speed faster than any genin or chunin. As he turned the corner, he saw a girl in an odd coat and skirt and a man dressed like a Suna blade dancer holding the scarf clad boy off the ground. Both of them carried something on their backs. A wrapped bundle as large as he was, and a large closed fan. He paused his observation to hear them. The boy wearing makeup laughed and said, "Damn brat, that hurt. You should learn to respect your betters, as we are the only ones that you could possibly refer to as that." The other two cheered. Sakura looked surprised, and Naruto smirked when Konohamaru kicked him in the throat. After all, it was one of his original moves, and he had used it against Zabuza. When Konohamaru punched the man stomped on him, causing him to strike the ground too hard. Looking at the bug under his shoe, the painted one simply laughed and said, "Kankuro, stop, we don't want to be doing this when he gets here." The other two had thrown kunai at him because Sakura was acting like a frozen board and wasn't very helpful, so he raised his foot and hopped out of the way, saying, "Don't worry, this won't take 2 minutes." As instructed by Ebisu Sensei, Konohamaru regrouped and adopted Naruto's hawk formation. The three appeared to be prepared to strike, and Kankuro regarded them warily. As Kankuro rubbed his throat, Tamari said, "These little brats are good, kinda short, but they fight well. When do your kids graduate? Later this year?" Udon simply prepared more shuriken as Moegi shook her head. Konohamaru responded to Tamari. As Kankuro merely glared and unfastened his straps to the weapon on his back, Tamari went pale when he said, "We take the graduation exam in 3 years. We are second-year students. Suna needs to speed up our own methods if they are teaching their students this well." Then, to the surprise of both, Konohamaru said something. The hooded one was hit by a stone from a tree at this point. "Our sensei taught us how to do that last tactic in the move I used on Mr. Hood. He is the best of this year's graduating class." Sasuke was sitting in the tree when Sakura turned and squealed. Naruto simply shook his head as he played with another rock. When Kankuro had fully unburdened his load from his back, he glared up at him. As Tamari concentrated on the group and at last noticed the pink-haired one and the one behind her patting a horse, Kankuro questioned, "And who are you, little squirrel?" A strange echo of calmness from the one of his features that was especially well hidden made her tense. As Kankuro stored the information for later, he declared, "Uchiha Sasuke, Rookie of the Year, and Ninjutsu Specialist of this graduating year." Sasuke turned to the group and asked, "So you taught these kiddies?" He speculated that they might have learned those moves from watching him and that they were trained by the best. As he crushed the other stone in what Naruto thought was a very depressing display of strength, he said, "I don't recall it, but I probably did something that inspired them to come up with that last move." As Konohamaru interrupted, the three of them said in unison, "You didn't do anything, you backwards queer. Boss told us how you were a thief and a pain in his neck." Tamari interrupted Sakura as she was grabbing the children and telling them that they should be proud that Sasuke was defending them. She sensed another presence and knew it was waiting to discover the answer to the same question, so she asked, "So if this guy didn't teach them, who did?" Just as Sasuke opened his mouth to repeat the same thing, the cloaked figure appeared. In order to better intimidate those who had already attempted to attack his team, he was employing the tactic of speaking while emotionally detached. Everyone turned to listen to the new speaker, who introduced themselves as the Konohamaru Corps, and said, "They are my students." Understood the tone of the boss's voice. "Boss!" exclaimed Konohamaru. Udon said, "You came to our aid." Moegi blushed. "That is just so cool," she concluded. A swirl of sand formed in the area between them as their purported boss nodded, infuriating Sakura and Sasuke. It displayed a redhead who was staring at the newcomer with no emotion on his face. He was dressed in standard black desert clothing with a big white sash and a gourd on his back. He also had a love tattoo on his forehead. As Tamari and Kankuro started to perspire due to his presence, the redhead remarked, "I was wondering when you were going to present yourself." In response to the redhead, Naruto bowed. The redhead gave a nod and introduced himself and his friends, saying, "I too was waiting for your appearance." The redhead concluded, "I am Sabaku no Gaara. The girl is my sister Tamari, and my brother Kankuro." Naruto bowed and gestured sequentially to each of the children. As Gaara merely gave him a passive glance and said, "Glasses 1 is their intelligence operative, Udon." "The kunoichi with the aim that almost skewered your brother," Kankuro snarled. The girl blushed. "Is Moegi. Finally, the leader of this little band of ferocious pranksters is the one in the blue scarf and goggles. Wait, they all wear goggles. Anyway, he is Konohamaru. Together they're the next team 4. I am one of their sensei." Naruto concluded while Gaara raised an eyebrow, wondering who it was and where in the world a horse had come from. Sasuke was glaring. Sakura watched in awe as the recently dubbed Team 4 looked at their purported sensei. After giving a nod, Gaara inquired about the blonde's name. As he calmly took off his hat, he declared, "I am Konoha's present samurai, I am Naruto Uzumaki." The group's reactions were mixed. Gaara spoke again after the Tsunagenin nodded. He turned to go, but Naruto's response caught him off guard. "I will look forward to meeting you in the upcoming exam, Uzumaki." As Gaara nodded and left, the other two Tsunagenin turned ghostly white. "I am not in the exam. Gaara-san. Perhaps when I return we could spar though." In response, Team 4 ran and embraced their sensei, but he refused to move, and they collided with a very solid blonde who, fortunately, did not employ the bolster technique. The blonde had done this on purpose to show up, which infuriated Sasuke and Sakura. Sasuke was thinking because the blonde would not let them take the test until he had finished speaking with Kakashi about Naruto's solo mission and a replacement teammate. "I should have the special mission since I am Uchiha and I need every opportunity to gain power." Sakura was more inclined to believe Naruto's claim that he had taught these children how to use it. She was certain that he wasn't teaching others, even though she didn't know what he was doing during that time off. After all, he would have at least told them. Naruto was telling the K while ignoring his irate teammates. Core. What kind of training he wanted them to do independently in order to enhance their unique skills. They fled at full speed when he waved them away. The Uchiha said, "Hey Dobi, what's with you not taking the exam? Why do you get special treatment that I should get? After all, I am a Uchiha and I deserve it." Naruto ignored him and started to ride away, but he heard a cry of, "Baka," and swerved palm, causing Sakura to fall on her face as he rode off slowly. He arrived at the gate rather quickly, presented his documentation, adjusted his hat, and rode off to the capital and his mission there. With a large, heavily folded piece of paper in his hands, Naruto stood beside Palm. Gurren. Sensei was telling Naruto that the path they were on was the longest and that he would need to use Palm to jump the distance in order to arrive with plenty of time to spare if he wanted to keep his appointment, while Palm was nuzzling the paper. Additionally, the poor swordsman was becoming insane due to the conversation itself. Why do all the pointless discussions always center around something that is essentially pointless? When he folded up the map, Naruto noticed that a larger group was approaching down the road. The strangers noticed him standing there thinking about his problems when, to his surprise, a young girl called out. Pulling on her mother's sleeve, the girl pointed and said, "Mommy, look, is that one of those ninjas you told us you would let us see on the trip to Uncle's home?" As her companion, her mother reprimanded her, saying, "Kono, stop that. It is not polite to point." Naruto assumed it was her husband, and the girl's father simply smiled and approached. He extended his arm. As Naruto shook the man's hand, he said, "Hello." The woman sat on a rock with her pack on the ground next to her. "I am Takahashi. This is my wife Yonohara," she said with a smile and a wave. Naruto deduced that she was pregnant based on the bulge of her kimono. As soon as the equivalent of a 50-pound weight tackled his leg from the side, he bowed to them both. Naruto looked at the person he hadn't noticed and felt his heart stop. That makes this little bundle of joy, our youngest girl, Konohashi. However, she can't stand her name, so we call her Kono. The last one is our second oldest, Sana. She was the picture of excellence. It would be difficult for him to find another person who could capture his interest half as well as any of the sisters, Lena and Haku, he had assumed. He realized right away that he was mistaken. This young lady resembled a celebrity. Her glow filled the entire space right around her. She had flawless, tanned skin. A pair of stick ornaments held her light brown hair in place. Her face was perfect and shaped like a heart. Her cheekbones were slightly higher than those of the other members of her immediate family, and her lips were flawless, not overly full. Her nose was so small that it appeared to have been stolen from a princess who had gone missing. But it was her eyes that caused Naruto to lose focus when he saw them. They held themselves with a warmth and a gleam that seemed to come from her mother, and they were equally as intelligent as her father. Naruto would have chosen river water in the late fall if he had been asked to choose a color. He thought that was the only shade of brown that looked like hers. A bit of hair fell in front of her left eye, making it impossible for him to see all the spheres. She was so effortlessly proportioned that her hourglass figure would make the sisters blush. He looked at her and saw that her bust was proportionately full to the rest of her body. Everyone turned to watch him in alarm as he hit his shoulder to pull himself out of a daze. "Mosquitoes," he said, heading to his pack and tucking the map into his pocket as Takahashi approached him and discussed his intended destination. The man said, somewhat embarrassed, "So where are you headed, Mr.? I don't think I got your name?" As he placed his bag on Palm's back, Naruto nodded. He bowed as he turned. With a look of amazement, the man said, My name is Naruto Uzumaki, present resident swordsman of Konohagakure. To the utter bewilderment of the blonde, he hurried to his wife and informed her of his discovery. His youngest daughter ran over and tugged on the leg of his coat as he hurried back and started to apologize for not treating her with the respect she deserved earlier. The little girl was grinning up at him when he looked down. As her parents attempted to stop her, she asked, "Mister, do you hurt bad people?" And Sana gave him a look. He simply knelt down to the girl's eye level and shook his head. Sana was taken aback when he simply looked down at her and gave her a wounded expression. "I try not to, but everyone does something they don't want to." After giving him a nod, the girl rushed to her sister, grabbed her arm, pulled her to Naruto's side, and took their hands, pushing them together. She made a pouting face as she glanced up at the two. Sana simply turned to Naruto, who was grinning at her, and looked at her sister with a drop of perspiration. "Sister, this is Mr. Uzumaki. He is nice, maybe he can make you feel better." As he reached out and took her hand, Sana felt a surge of heat from the boy's silk wrapped hands. "I will certainly try to make you happy." When his hands released and he started to walk with her family, she wasn't sure how to respond. She simply blushed slowly and followed them. It wasn't always fun for Naruto to travel with the family. He did not like being mentally questioned by them or the fact that Sana would occasionally ask him a question that made him feel uncomfortable, even though he had someone to talk to and was getting closer to the gorgeous woman. Yes, he would prefer to arrive in the capital a little after dark so that he could collect his thoughts and meditate. After that, he would come up with a plan to approach the stunning woman. All he would need to do is wait a few hours. At the capital's gates, standing at the enormous stone gates, Naruto watched in wonder. In his life, he had witnessed many massive objects, including mountains, vast forests, and the ocean from his most recent trip to the Wave Country. However, Kami created all of those, and as a result, they were designed to vastly outstrip human endeavors. He wasn't implying that he hadn't also been utterly amazed by human-made objects. One of the best examples of how humans can create incredible structures is the Hokage Mountain in Konohagakure. Additionally, he had seen Tezuna's Great Bridge of Wave. He dutifully recalled the man who attempted to name it after himself, but he quickly dispelled that absurd notion. He was still viewed by the villagers as the land-saving hero. He would never find out how they did it. He turned to face his fellow travelers, who were making last-minute preparations for admission. With a nod, he motioned to Palm, who approached and handed him his pack. Takahashi approached Naruto, shook his hand once more, and expressed gratitude for the companionship. Naruto thanked everyone else and nodded. As the pair and Takahashi made their way to the entrance, the brown-haired goddess moved to his side, and Kono grabbed his foot and urged him to stay with them. However, her mother intervened. As the girl began to leave, the blonde nodded and said, "Thank you for coming with us, Naruto." But he was so tightly pinched that he had to call out to get her attention. He shook his head and patted his inside coat pocket, hoping that his sensei was being smothered right now. "Yes, Naruto-san? Did we forget something?" he asked. He was trying to beat the living daylights out of himself when she walked forward, wrote something on a piece of paper, and handed it to him. "I was wondering, Sana, would you perhaps like to go to dinner with me before I leave to go back to my village?" she asked with a smile. She kissed his cheek and rushed off to where her sister was asking the Imperial Gate Guard pointed questions. "This is my father's brother's address. Come by in 4 days and I will be happy to go to dinner with you." Her mother and father simply watched this exchange with childlike grins as Sana caught up to them and they vanished into the hustle and bustle of the city's streets. As the guards called for someone to accompany him to the daimyo's court, Naruto approached them and handed them his documents. They informed him that he would need to wait a short while. As they proceeded to clear the other individuals gathered around the gate, he nodded and took a seat. Thus, our samurai sat in the waiting pavilion, where other people were seen completing their departure preparations or waiting for companions. He had been there for a minute before he heard a couple discussing a night of sex he had had at one of the ostensibly many whorehouses in the capital. Additionally, he quickly learned that the man was acting in this way because his wife was no longer meeting his expectations, which infuriated Naruto. Just as he was about to break the man's skull, a tall, thin man showed up. He was flanked by 3 men who appeared to be the daimyo's guard, and he was dressed in the robes of an advisor. He came over after spotting our blonde. In a lazy guard position, the guards are falling into step. He bowed, to which Naruto stood and returned with equal reverence, saying, "Welcome to the capital, young samurai. Or do you prefer Uzumaki-san? I am the daimyo's advisor on foreign affairs," said Setsune. The man nodded, grinning broadly, and ushered him up as the guard on his left took the blonde's pack. "Yes sir, Mr. Setsune. I prefer to be addressed as Uzumaki-san as that is most comfortable for people. I am going to guess you are here for the position of escort to the daimyo's estate?" he asked. As they went outside, they witnessed another attempt to lead Palm, but Palm's head batted away the attempt. After apologizing, Naruto walked through the city in lockstep with Palm's reins. They traveled down lengthy streets that were lined with eateries, shops, and a number of dojos, the majority of which seemed to be of the same design. After passing another, he inquired about their origins with Setsune. Naruto nodded as he observed the dojo participants employing a weak display of kenjutsu that, if it were all he had been taught, he would not have even looked at a battlefield with. Oh, the dojos are all under the new rising Master Quan. He is the capital's most promising swordsman so far as to no other will challenge him after he has dispatched the previous leader, Master Fusun. To find out if there were any other masters in the city, he asked the advisor. He replied that there were two, one of whom was an expert with a sword and halberd, and the other held a broadsword and scimitar, which attracted Naruto's attention. When he considered asking them for a spar if he had the time, he became quiet. He ignored these thoughts when he saw the group pass the Grand Palace. He turned to go inside, but the group called him back to his perplexity. You will be meeting the daimyo at his own estate, a great honor, as normally he doesn't even allow people to see him in the palace usually. Although your family lineage does warrant the respect you are being given, don't you agree? The man grinned and simply lowered his head. The blonde continued to walk after the group surprised the man, saying, I would not know Master Setsune. I was orphaned since I could actually remember even with my photographic memory. I do not recall seeing any family. Did the Sandaime not inform you of nothing? Naruto shrugged as he pulled a senbon from his sleeve and saw the guards tighten their grips on their weapons, until he started to twirl it absently in lazy patterns. The group came to a halt at the gate of a continuous red area, which was watched over by two fully armored men. The group turned to the blonde, nodded, and led them into the courtyard. Palm trotted over and stood by the gate, waiting for Naruto to nod. The daimyo will send for someone to fetch you from the main entryways soon. I suggest you be there when you are called. He waved to the advisor, nodded in response to the summons, and went inside. Inside the estate of the daimyo whistling, Naruto stood in the foyer. As he examined the tapestries and glass cases along the walls containing a variety of weapons and armor, he thought, nice place, though I would have gone with less gold and pearl inlay. The sight of a barbarian's blood-stained brown armor, clad in a black hooded cloak and sun hat, stopped him in his tracks. Armor of an invader of the far northern wastelands. No wonder Sensei was going to barbecue me, because if I had seen what I was wearing, I would have stabbed myself. When the door opened, Naruto turned to see a man in a butler or manservant's uniform enter the room and bow. He beckoned him forward, and Naruto hurried after him while watching. The long hallway was decorated in the same way, which annoyed him. Then came the next one, and the one after that, and the one before that, until they reached a huge pair of doors. Naruto saw two gold carved figures sitting on either side of the doors, and he knew they were the door guardians of legend. The manservant gestured him inside, and he shrugged it off. As he peered into the room, he noticed a golden canopy that held a chair and a long expanse of marble that extended from the doors. He was not duped by the armed, fully armored guards along the marble's edge or by the six of the daimyo's fabled fire guardians gathered around the canopy. Because of the shadow the canopy was casting, he couldn't see anyone when he looked up at the chair. He slid his senbon back into his sleeve after clearing his throat. Naruto heard a powerful elderly voice reverberate throughout the throne room, saying, "Come forward, Samurai of the Leaves. Your arrival has been awaited anxiously." After removing his hat and cloak, Naruto removed them and put them away at the manservant's instructions. Then he walked over to the throne. My goodness, I have never experienced such overwhelming chakra and pure power readings in one space. I'm trying everything to find a weakness in the room, but this formation is far too strong. It makes sense that a daimyo would not be killed for being unprotected. Naruto kept walking until he reached the bottom of the stairs that led to the top of the canopy, feeling every pair of eyes pierce his body. He raised his head and bowed before the daimyo, praying fervently that he had done nothing to give the impression that he had been impolite. Naruto instantly stood up with a speed that would have astounded Guy, saying, "Rise, young Uzumaki. I wish to see the newest samurai in the ranks of the Leaf Village." Before the daimyo gave him the order to stop, the blonde circled around. He tensed instantly. After nodding, the guards and his guardians filed out, and the guardians vanished in a blur. "Very good, you are doing very well to show respect to me when you have not been instructed on how. Guardians leave, I wish to speak to young Uzumaki alone for a minute." Naruto was memorizing the man's face as he gazed at him. He was much older than he had anticipated, with white eyebrows and a bushy beard. With the exception of a slashing mark across the top of his head and crown, he was bald. "Consider Bleach's captain, General." As the daimyo spoke, Naruto was cut. Naruto bowed at a 90-degree angle and started answering any questions the daimyo asked before he got to the ones he couldn't answer. You have been showing to be quite a surprising upstart, young Uzumaki. I have heard of your skill from the Sandaime. Yes, me and Hiruzen Sarutobi go way back. He speaks highly of you, as does the entire country of Wave. I have never heard of someone of your chosen profession rising to such a level without those maneuvers that ninjas are so proud of. Naruto nodded and asked, so you are trained by those swords and a summon turtle? Did you learn any ninja techniques whatsoever? Just the basic 3 daimyo. Sama, even if barely, I also know the samurai's form of the summoning technique, but that is all. The elderly gentleman nodded. The blonde became tense when he saw that the daimyo were cheering him on as he lifted his hands and clapped. That is very impressive, you who imprison one of the 2 great demons of this land, yet you have become such an honorable and courageous character is quite a feat, and you are but a child yourself, truly remarkable. You do your family proud, I think you would agree, don't you think? The daimyo asked with the blonde in tears. It was something that the daimyo were aware of. The blonde's eyes widened and he frantically shook his head, making a lot of popping noises. Why is this that you flinch for? Do you not think that your exploits are astounding? Does this mean that my offer is to be declined? He asked. No sir daimyo. Sama, it is just that I do not know my family. The council of the Hidden Leaf Village has labeled me as an orphan from birth. WWWHHHAATTT. The daimyo roared, frightening the blonde almost to death. 2 fire guardians immediately tackled him down, one of them holding his neck to the edge of a terrifying pike. The daimyo had already stood and was rushing down the stairs of his canopy when he attempted to apologize. He stood up, glared at the blonde, grabbed him, and shoved his guards away. The daimyo became enraged when Naruto shook his head and said, if you are joking with me, young one, I will have you punished, but if not, I shall inform you of your lineage. He waved the guards away and raised his hand to the boy. Naruto was taken aback by the iron grasp of the male. You are the heir to one of the most powerful fighting clans in the elemental countries, which of the likes is near the level of the now extinct Kagaya, and the still barely present Uchiha, Hyonas, and the Hyuga. You are the last living descendant of the prized Hagenoisha, the brother clan to my own, and holders of one of the most powerful bloodlines that is said to exist in this land. Does this now tell you who your mother and father is and what your bloodline is? The brunette barely raised his eyebrows. Before pacing around cursing, the daimyo threw a scroll at the blonde's feet and growled. Feeling his sensei peek out to read it too, Naruto picked up the scroll and unfolded it. He marveled at the exquisite details of the tree that housed his supposedly missing family. His family's matriarch was read by him. Taishi Hagenoisha, the first master of the mounted halberd style and a retainer of the Senju clan, deceased. Heiress to the Showdown Raikage's clan, deceased. And married to Ayaka Hamaso. Naruto skipped down until he reached the final new additions. Veteran Hai no Kuni military branch spearman Kiru Hagenoisha, deceased. Keisanami Ulaha, daughter of Cat Claws, deceased. Tajera clan masters. 1 son, Yandaimi Hokage. Konoha's Yellow Flash, Minato Hagenoisha Namikaze, was left an orphan after both of his parents died at the Battle of Cheng's Pass, deceased, 3rd in line to rule. She was married to Uzumaki Kushina, the heiress to Whirlpool Country, which has since been destroyed. 2 children. Naruto Hagenoisha Uzumaki, the youngest, and Reka Hagenoisha Uzumaki, the eldest, deceased. Naruto gazed in disbelief at the scroll. All of the elemental nations held his parents in high regard. He never knew his now deceased older sister. According to these reports, his mother was still alive, proving the villagers were correct. She had left him. This was beyond Naruto's comprehension, and he let the scroll drop limp from his grasp. The daimyo gave the boy a pitying glance. It would have broken a weaker spirit to have grown up with that burden and to have known nothing, but now he was this little child standing in front of him, painfully aware of the world around him. Despite his sympathy, he picked up the scroll and placed it in the boy's hands. He heard what sounded like something breaking and turned to face the boy who was containing his groans and not crying, which caused the noises he was hearing. Desperation, sorrow, anger, fury, and hate were just a few of the emotions the daimyo could see coursing through the boy as he turned to face him. There were probably a million more that he couldn't even begin to comprehend. Naruto could hardly hear his sensei nipping at him or the Heims calling to him. He was at a loss for what to do. He was unable to feel even his most powerful, bloodthirsty side. After giving everything some thought, he turned to the scroll, rolled it up, and returned it to the daimyo in a neutral position. As the daimyo glanced at the scroll in bewilderment and then back at the boy, the blonde said, "I deny any relation to my so-called parents. I am an orphan who just found out that he had unknown parents from the Hagenoisha clan, and that I might have a bloodline that belonged to that clan." That is all, but could you explain about this supposed bloodline ability? Uzumaki-san, you now know who your parents are, why would you dismiss that they have any relation to you? Naruto asked the daimyo directly, overcoming his previous fear of the man. Neither of them had any part of being a parent aside from the cycle of one implanting me and the other conceiving me. I do not see either as a parent, and as for the woman, I have had no mother whatsoever daimyo, sama. The daimyo nodded, stating that there was no way to force him to retract his statement in return for anything, and as the boys desired. Very well, you will have no longer any claim to your so-called parents, the least I can do considering what you did for the people of Wave. The blonde nodded and went to wait as the daimyo dismissed him to meet the other person for this trip, promising to see him again before departing for his village. The following day, in one of the daimyo retainer rooms, Naruto proceeded down an oak corridor in the direction of the room where he was to meet the other individual, who was ostensibly a daimyo official of high rank. He turned to look at the door leading to his destination. He rapped, "Enter." Naruto followed instructions and saw an elderly man drinking tea at a table across from the door. When he looked up and saw Naruto, he clutched his chest as though he had been frightened. The man nodded and ushered Naruto inside. "You wished to see me before I went to discover the city, sir?" Naruto asked. Naruto stood and went in. The man reached out and prodded the blonde's chest, and Naruto turned to face him. The man whispered, and Naruto arched an eyebrow. When his grandfather was mentioned, Naruto tensed up and cleared his throat, saying, "Dear Kami, he looks just like Kiru, even the scars." After giving him a quick glance and nodding, the man offered the blonde a cushion, which he accepted. As the man poured him some tea, Naruto nodded and said, "I am guessing you do not know me." Naruto glanced at his man and took out the scroll from the previous day, saying, "I am your granduncle and brother to Karu Hagenoisha, Taruha Hagenoisha, your only surviving relative of the Hagenoisha clan." He glanced at the spot where he had burned off his father's and mother's knowledge and saw the man's name. He asked the man if he could provide evidence, raising an eyebrow in the process. With a laugh, the man said, "Wouldn't be very legitimate if I couldn't, would it?" Naruto could hear the pain in his lungs from the intense exercise. As he stood and closed his eyes across from Naruto, he nodded and asked him to stand and adopt an unnatural stance that most people wouldn't notice. After adopting the position the man requested, Naruto watched as the man opened his eyes, revealing only a shaded representation of his pupils that fluctuated between solid and non-existent. After looking at the stance, he started talking. He continued until he stopped and the blonde gave him a startled look. Left foot is too far out, right foot at a wrong angle, left hip too low, hands incorrectly positioned, and shoulders too tight. Our bloodline, the anali, the ability for our body to break down any form of analyzation possible and point out the flaws in the immediate time we have, gets slower however in age. It branches to the sensory system, the muscular system, and with a high enough level of perfection the chakra system, allowing us to make our chakra stores twice what they are normally, which in our family is usually why we specialize in an if not many weapons. We are the perfect balance of strength versus mind. Naruto grinned as he realized that his capacity for analysis was merely the fundamentals of his unawakened bloodline. As he sat and listened to his granduncle and himself introduce themselves, he nodded. They spent a lot of time discussing all the families Naruto had never met. Since he had left the world, he had become less concerned about his parents and had instead turned his attention to the family Taruha could tell him about and that he could locate on the scroll. After a few cups of tea, his grandfather asked him a question. His tone was dejected. "You grew to be a ninja, didn't you?" he said. With a shake of his head, Naruto described his job and his role in the village. When he inquired about the blonde's weapons, he replied that he had a senbon, but when he was asked about weapons that could not be batted away, his grandfather's mood brightened significantly. He shook his head as his uncle leapt to his feet and vanished into the closet, fumbling with a loud bang and pulling out a variety of objects. He took a seat at the table and showed him the first item he unwrapped, a beautifully made leather item with a tiny strap that was supposed to fit around his waist. After being informed that it was a quiver, he opened the next case to reveal a wooden bow. When he picked it up, he was astounded by the bow's strength in spite of its age, as his uncle had told him, and he felt as though he could literally blend into the grip in complete comfort. He plucked the string and listened to it jingle and hum. He inquired about the small amulet that was hanging from the top. Sweating, Naruto slid the bow onto his back and felt it slide into the sleeve on the quiver as well. "It's the family's symbol. I put it there so that people could tell which end is the top." He turned to see his uncle give him the final item on the list. Metal netting covered the remainder of his face, and a mask covered the top of his head and the right side of his face. Naruto examined the eyeholes and stated that it was a hunter mask for samurai that had been handed down from the clan's matriarch when he was a boy. It was made of a mixture of copper and steel and had numerous dents and scratches polished out of it. After examining the object, Naruto saw the man give him roughly 30 arrows, claiming that they had unique heads and that he should save them for emergencies. Unaware that this would be his final encounter with his grandfather while he was there, he nodded and gave him an embrace. Before he saw anything from the door, he waved and walked away. Naruto snatched a weapon from the corner and said, "Granduncle, what is this?" The fact that it was 2 feet taller than him was terrifying. The handle resembles a spear but is about 6 feet long and jade green, while the blades are 2 feet long. It was a brilliantly sharpened blade with a great sleeping beast etched on its face. Naruto nodded as he stared at it and called the sisters. His uncle looked up and waved it away, saying, "It is just a weapon we raided from a temple in Iwa during the 4th Great Shinobi War. It is practically just a giant waste of time as no one can wield it effectively. How near am I to completing my sword training, ladies?" He heard them both ask why, and he replied that he wanted to try and get scrolls to learn another style from the masters because Konoha is sorely lacking in good sword teachers. You should finish the wakizashi with a few more weeks of practice, same for the okatana. They accepted, and before he could see the city, he said goodbye to his granduncle and went off to train while he waited for his second meeting with the daimyo. "Please, Kami, make sure I don't hear any more bad news while I'm here. If they try to surprise me, I don't even know if I'll go back to the village." The arrow struck the target's upper left corner, causing it to creak back and forth, adding to the already sizable group embedded within the target. Before they noticed that the arrows formed the pattern of the Leaf Village's emblem, anyone would have assumed that the archer lacked any kind of skill. Gazing at the target, Naruto smiled. There must have been a sizable number of bowmasters in the compound because there was an ample supply of arrows for him to practice with. After firing his 356th consecutive arrow, he had observed that the more he tried, the more clearly he could see the target and the more effectively he could fire. He was happy that his granduncle had explained that he could use this specific type of practice to advance both his bloodline and his proficiency in the preferred skill of the Hagenoisha family. With his bloodline barely activated, he aimed another arrow, strung it, and let it fly. The arrow flew through the air and struck the wooden target in the middle, shattering it due to all the previous arrow cracks. He grinned as he destroyed another by strunging 4 at once and letting loose. The final one shattered in a flash, and he grinned. As one of the man's servants set down a few ceramic vases and he released his final arrows, crushing them to powder with an ease he didn't even have when lounging with the K, the blonde thought, "What do you know? I can accent speed, power, and multitude to the arrows and still leave me plenty of chance to continue on with the battle." Core. As he picked up an arrow from the ground and positioned it, he felt a presence and looked up to see the royal procession approaching the gate. He sensed someone approaching him and noticed that the daimyo was accompanied by a young woman who, if her face was meant to convey anything, appeared to believe he was a cross between a skunk and a snail. Naruto merely raised an eyebrow at her tone and pointed to the peach tree on the other side of the range. "Father, why are we here? This commoner couldn't possibly be worthy of our importance at this time. I wish to arrive at the opera house and watch the opening performance, so can we proceed?" she asked, turning to the daimyo. The daimyo said, aiming for the trunk, "Naruto-san," with a tone that suggested he would likely feel ashamed if he missed the challenging target. The girl gave him a sly look as he steadied his draw, and the daimyo said sharply, "Shouldn't you aim at one of the targets instead? After all, you just started the day before yesterday. It would be foolish to embarrass yourself by setting a target you can't hit." The blonde warrior closed one eye, directed all of the bloodline control he had managed to obtain toward his open eye, and allowed the changes to occur. Not the trunk, daimyo. Sama. More like the probability of aiming at a snack. The target appeared to be dangling an inch in front of the arrow, as he could see. As if someone were speaking directly into his ear, he could read the shift in the wind's speed. He was able to relax his shoulders a bit and block out some of the sun's rays to better focus on his target. The two observed the boy loosening up a little, as if he were going to switch targets, only to let it fly. They only saw a blur as the arrow appeared to disappear, but because of his ancestry, Naruto saw every second of it in the air as though it were moving slowly. He grinned when they heard a loud crash that was hardly audible to them and noticed the arrow with 2 sliced peaches on the table across the courtyard from the group. They gaped as Naruto emerged from the crouch he had been using to wield the arrow. After bowing to the two, he departed to meet a stunning young lady for an outing. Later that evening, in the city outside, in search of a suitable place to pick up Sana in the evening, Naruto was strolling down the street. He was cursing himself as he hurried through the streets, checking his pocket watch every few seconds. He paused in front of a shop, entered, and proceeded directly to the counter. The elderly woman behind the counter looked him up and down as he begged, "Hello, do you sell evening wear? I have a date and I need to be on time, so please just help me. I only have an hour. He was quickly informed that she dealt in evening wear from overseas after she nodded and led him to a collection of shirts, vests, pants, and jackets. As the woman pushed him into the dressing room and took a number of items off the racks, he chose to ignore it. 10 minutes later, he emerged and received a nod of approval. He had on a white long-sleeve shirt with the cuffs pulled up to his mid-forearm, black slacks, and a white undershirt. When he put on a matching black jacket with a high collar and a blue tie, he spun around in the mirror, paid the woman for the outfit right away, and put the clothes he had brought on the saddle. Palm vanished with a snort. He was wearing a deep ocean blue vest with black swirls, and his pocket watch was running through the pockets. Then he whispered, "Gale," and darted off down the streets to where he was going. His companion was waiting for her date to show up. Looking down the street, she shrugged, pulled the jacket tighter over her kimono, and told herself she would wait for him a little after the hour. He was supposed to arrive in a few minutes, but it appeared he wouldn't make it. With both swords on Palm's saddle and just his sensei's knife on him, Naruto was cursing as he was surrounded by thugs on the opposite side of the village who were requesting his money. After teaching Naruto a more accurate method of concentrating his energy and applying the officer skills, Gurren Sensei was waiting back at the room in the daimyo's estate so he could unwind. One hurried at him, but Naruto drew his stab away with an open hand, tripped him, and caused him to lose his balance and fall to the ground. "Hey, did you hear us, Blondie? We said give us your money or we are going to take you apart." A roundhouse followed by a rising star kick took out the next one. When the next one lunged with a forked spear, Naruto grabbed the end, tore it from the man's grasp, and slammed him and the next two away with it. As he turned to face the leader, the blonde's attention was drawn to an elderly man who grabbed Naruto's punch and threw him away. He jumped back, slid his knife into his coat, and turned to face the elderly man. As his students fled, the elder squatted in stance and reached for a scimitar on his back, asking, "What do you think you are doing to my disciples?" The man smirked as he took his scimitar from behind and held it from his waist while Naruto pulled out his knife. "I was ambushed by your so-called pupils. They tried to rob me. Now please just let me go or I will draw my weapon." He stepped forward just a single step before the man approached and sent him flying back, unarmed and bleeding from a wound to his neck. He grabbed his sword and wiped the blood off a portion of Naruto's jacket before leaving the bloody samurai to head quickly to Sana's house. "Just because you could beat my pupils, doesn't mean you could take me. Though your level is surprising to say the least." She shook her head, took one last look around before going inside to sleep, and saw that Naruto was nowhere to be seen. No one was coming down the street. Naruto felt his stomach fall when he turned the corner just in time to see Sana shaking her head. Due to his lack of preparation and the beating he received from that man, he had blown it for her. Her father came out and stepped in front of the boy as he hurried up the stairs to catch her. He raised his eyebrows at the wound on his neck, through which he could see the bone of his shoulder, and said, "You are too late. She has gone to sleep, Uzumaki-san." He was about to call for assistance when the boy simply stared at the windows and left, still bleeding, but noticeably less than before. Takahashi stopped and turned to face the man, asking him a question, just as he was about to ask if he needed an escort home. "Takahashi-san, if she would not mind, I would like to try again. I leave tomorrow, however, for my village and I am too busy to pursue a relationship as of right now. Though if she forgives me I could provide her in your family room and board to come visit me in the Leaf Village. Sorry for disturbing you this night and for bleeding on your porch." Naruto then used his Gale weapon and disappeared. After scratching his head, Takahashi went to inform his wife and oldest daughter about what had just happened. At the exact location where Naruto lives, Naruto proceeded to his guest house after passing through the service entrance. In his now blood-soaked clothing, he ignored the several groups of people who were staring at him as he passed. Holding that damned cat, he walked past the daimyo's wife. He opened the door and stepped into the guest house, shivering. Shinobu was petting Gurren Sensei while the sisters conversed. The door opened and Naruto entered, waving before passing them in his state. They had just begun to laugh at a joke Gurren Sensei had told them. After exchanging glances, the three decided it would be best to avoid getting involved in this one. With a sense of relief as his blood washed from his body, Naruto entered the bathroom and dove headfirst into the shower. As he examined the wound, he noticed that the dried layer of blood was turning into a layer of discolored skin that would eventually reveal a scar. With a sigh, Naruto washed his hair. Since the Kyuubi was a demon, Naruto always kept his knife close at hand to lessen its control over him. However, this made him less able to heal and made him more prone to injuries for a longer period of time, and every actual wound eventually manifested as a scar. He snarled at the beast's influence, exited the shower, and walked to his room to sleep while wearing silk boxers. He told his friends that he had absolutely no interest in discussing his night and that he now knew they would put it off until much later. After bidding his granduncle farewell and thanking the daimyo for being such a kind host, he would depart from this damn place tomorrow. After that, he entered the holding realm of dreams. In the dreams of Naruto. That night, Naruto was plagued by dreams once more, but they weren't the same as his previous ones. There he was, bleeding and defeated, on the sand beach. He had his heims lying far out of reach. Numerous dead fighters' bodies were scattered all around him, and in the distance, he could make out the ominous silhouette of a nine-tailed fox roaring. He turned to face his murderer, but all he saw were his eyes. He also had gray eyes that seemed to have ripples in them. Naruto noticed that the eyes of the bodies immediately surrounding the figure were similar. In fact, they all had a somewhat similar appearance. Since it was too dark to see the color, he assumed it was the same shade of hair. They all appeared to have died after he had injured them. Naruto saw something and attempted to stand, but his injuries caused him to fall to his back once more. His stomach was torn apart, and his blood washed away the seal he believed contained the Kyuubi. For a brief moment, he tried to stop the blood by placing his hands to his stomach, but he soon realized that it was impossible. The figure sitting on a boulder a short distance away interrupted him in his attempts. "You did try to stop us, but in the end you failed. You were foolish to think you could stop a god. But you at least learned this rule before we sent you on your way. Goodbye Naruto Uzumaki Hagenoisha, may your stay in Kami's domain be nicer than your life in this one." Naruto attempted to roll away when a blade came to his neck. In the real world, Shinobu heard something coming from the hallway as she made her way to the kitchen nook for a cup of tea. What did it sound like? Tears? She knocked on her master's door, forgetting her current objective of getting a cup of tea. The lantern she was holding clattered to the floor as she creaked open the door and said, "Naruto-kun. Are you awake?" Something she saw would linger in her dreams for a long time. Through closed eyes, she and her sister's master, the future sage of the Horse Clan, were in tears. He allegedly dragged his hands across his face to escape the nightmare he was trapped in, resulting in cuts. She watched with tears in her eyes as he made sounds of pathetic origin. The barely perceptible outline of his Oni spirit, as she, her sister, and Sensei could come to call it, was sitting cross-legged in front of his bed when she attempted to get a closer look. It was clenching its fingers, facing the bed, and the floor was burning in little trails of fire, with cuts and nicks showing. It appeared eager for combat, but the spirit was enraged because it seemed as though its opponent was out of its grasp. When she looked to her master, it turned to face her and shook its head, telling her not to get involved. After giving a nod, she walked out of the room and paused in the corridor. A voice pierced the atmosphere as she stood there considering how she could assist. To find out who had called her name, she turned. As though he could see through the wall behind her, she noticed Gurren Sensei gazing sadly past her. He turned back to her and shook his head. It has begun. He had been warned by Palm and myself that he would gain one of his first premonitions soon, as he had finally reached the level to begin further interface with the Horse Clan and had begun to learn the true art of seals. I had hoped that to further along his training in officer skills, but it seemed that I acted too late. The turtle said as he gazed at the entrance with dissatisfaction. Shinobu asked, glancing at her sensei. In an attempt to find a solution to her master's suffering, she inquired, "Do you know what it is that he is seeing?" As he walked and lay down beside her, the turtle shook his head. There is no way to know till he awakens. But one of the first premonitions for all sages is usually how they meet their demise. I do not know why Kami has chose such a painful one to come first, but it was certainly something along the lines to help the sages, though many were either stupid enough to brush it away as common nightmare, or arrogant enough to think they could reach a level to making the dream void. They forget that they are all still fallible. After all, there is no such thing as infinite life. It usually just means it hasn't come to a close yet. She replied, and the two returned to the room as the screams began. Since they were closest to the blonde's home and could not possibly ignore the ear-splitting noises, none of the fire daimyo's city guards slept that night. All of them simply shuddered and resumed their waiting for the noises to end. For the members of the blonde's current board, the following morning did not arrive soon enough. Awakened, Naruto leapt to his feet. Despite constantly bathing himself in sweat throughout the night, he was still covered in it. The healing nuts on his face soaked his head roll in blood. Exhausted, he simply got up and walked to the shower. He emerged wearing his typical attire and went outside to prepare breakfast. When he opened the door, he saw his teacher and the sisters seated across from him. As he entered his room, they all awoke and turned to face him, letting him know that they were more aware of the situation than he was. He gave a nod, and they all entered the sitting room. Naruto sat down and prepared to share his prophecy with them when he heard Kyan exclaim, "Eep." When he opened his eyes, he saw the Oni spirit sitting on the vacant cushion, intently observing him. He glanced at the figure, too exhausted to think about what to do, so he simply waved and did what came to him. This startled the group and caused the Oni to make a dry hacking sound that only Naruto understood to be laughter. He told them everything after waiting for everyone to settle down. He told them everything without any interruptions, including the beach, the figure, the ominous silhouette, and his agonizing beheading that appeared to have been caused by a blunt sword. The four simply exchanged glances as their thoughts diverged greatly. The frightening thing is that he can talk about it with almost no emotion, proving that I was correct that it was the day of his death. Either he has given up on it or he is too exhausted to think clearly. Master was in excruciating pain. I had hoped he wasn't, but it appears that Gurren Sensei was correct. In his future, we must assist Master. While the Master is cursed by something like this, I sleep like a spoiled kitten, goddamn it. Sister and I won't allow that to occur, though, because this terrifying figure will find it difficult to perform those actions with us in our liberated forms, rearranging his internal organs. Perhaps I should make a note of this so that I can address this threat to us in the future. After all, even though I only act honorably for him, I am also an honorable creature by bond. As he ignored the demon in his head that insisted that he locate this figure and have him released right away, Naruto glanced at the four and could infer some of their thoughts. He then visualized a huge mallet and used it to strike the fox over the head. Naruto heard a knock on the door just as he was ready to get up. As he approached it, one of the numerous male servants gave him a note, bowed, and hurried away. After examining it, Naruto cut it open with a senbon needle and read it aloud to himself. Already, he didn't like it. Naruto.kun. Since the second exam is over and Kakashi wants his team to be together to increase Sasuke's chances of passing the third exam, the council wants you to return to the village. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Hokage Sandame Naruto scratched his neck and gathered his belongings. In 30 minutes, he and the others would be prepared. Gurren Sensei and Mr. Tall, quiet, and somewhat jittery were all that remained. When he gestured for him to move, he grabbed the blonde's arm and reintegrated into her body. After completing this, they made a brief stop by the daimyo and his granduncle before leaving for their house. In his office, Sarutobi Hiruzen sat moaning in agony. It was surprisingly easy for his enemy to defeat him. Although it wasn't very strong on its own, this definitely had strength in numbers. He was going to burn the stack of papers in front of him and create a hand seal for Dragon. Yes, his worst enemy was paperwork. Sarutobi was about to cut the stack of papers by a few dozen when he received a knock on his door. The moniker, Bane of all cages, was a fitting one for this alleged threat. The idea of something to relieve him of this tedious paperwork made him smile, but if it was his resentful receptionist, the poor woman would undoubtedly burn. When the door opened and Kakashi's head emerged, the Sandame interrupted the Junin as he opened his mouth to speak. The old man sighed as he turned his chair around and spoke to the window. He is not back yet, Kakashi. If you don't stop bugging me, I will have to take care of D-class missions for the next few years. The Junin gave a feeble nod and slid his head back out the door. Jiraiya.kun. What are you doing here? I don't have time to play games. A white-haired man hopped in through the window and stood on the other side of the old man's desk as he asked. Hello Sensei, I've come to give you an update on my spy network and I have some questions for you regarding my student's son. I just discovered that his name is missing from this year's graduation reports. Would you mind explaining that? Before the old Hokage asked him to sit, the elderly man sighed and glanced at one of his former pupils. As he lit his pipe and was soon surrounded by a thick cloud of smoke, the man said, he isn't listed because he is not a ninja Jiraiya. He is a samurai that is under my command till his team becomes Chunin. As much as that hurts me to know the fourth's legacy isn't going to follow his father's footsteps. The white-haired Sanin glanced at his sensei and grinned while shaking his head. The Hokage gave the man across from him a look of deep doubt before he sighed and decided that the boy's father's sensei was the only one with a chance because he had already failed. He turned to the window just as a Chunin gave him a message and vanished. Fine, I make him turn his career to a shinobi Sarutobi. Sensei, where's the brat? I have a few things to teach him anyway. The sound of a boom shook the Sandame's office, causing Jiraiya to fall to the ground. Oh dear, he said, something in my gut tells me that he is most definitely not the happiest person today. Well, we are in luck, he just walked into the village and is heading this way. Alongside our blonde swordsman. The boom was not caused by Naruto. Rather, it was a man wearing green spandex who screamed something about youth as he crashed through a brick wall. He was heading to the tower to deliver the mission report and head to the hot springs to unwind after his arduous journey. but he was stopped by someone in the waiting area and turned to face the voice. It was Hitaki, the lazy perverted bastard, who simply exuded that sense of smugness about something, even though he didn't look any different. "Hi Naruto. How was your trip? I'm happy to see you again." It was eventful, but not in the way to want to tell others. The blonde shrugged in response to the Junin's question about the blonde's alleged summons by the daimyo, which even he had never received. Waving until the blonde's response stopped him in his tracks, the Junin's brow furrowed as he glanced at the blonde, shrugged, and took out his book before leaving. "Don't forget that later you are to meet us to help Sasuke train for the third exam. It would be unfair for me to train with Uchiha-san since I probably wouldn't stop myself from permanently ending his career because of how his arrogance irritates me. I apologize, but he will have to train with his other ninja allies. Even so, you have the right to continue teaching because it is your job," the blonde remarked as Kakashi turned to look at him. He said, "Naruto, you were told to come back so the three of you could train in teamwork. Even someone of your caliber needs training. You are not all powerful nor do you have the potential like Sasuke-san does." He turned around again, and as soon as he started to leave, he was tripped by a moved rug and sent crashing to the ground. When the receptionist told him to go ahead and enter, Naruto grinned at the new ability he had finally had a chance to use. Doubt, which gave him the ability to project a sense that the opponent would be struck from their blind spot as long as they were close enough to be ensnared. He had a level of distance of about 30 meters. The Sandame's former genin team, known as the Legendary Three, held some of the most potent summoning contracts. Naruto tensed as he entered the room and saw the Hokage talking to a tall, white-haired man he recognized from pictures as Jiraiya of the Sanin. Jiraiya, the man in front of him, was said to be the strongest at the moment, known as the Hermit of the Toad Mountain and a writer of some very obscene literature that was frequently on the best-seller list. The pervert was a master of the human sealing art, and his single greatest accomplishment was the credit of training the fourth Hokage. He was not someone to be taken lightly, but even if he was the strongest of the three now, the other two were not to be taken lightly. Naruto had heard that the Anbu had lost track of Orochimaru, the holder of the snake summon contract, in the land of Rice, but he had turned tail and gone rouge from the village a few years earlier, allegedly abandoning a master of dozens of jutsus and wielder of a legendary blade, Kusanagi. Although Naruto knew that the snake had no real training with the blade because he was too conceited to learn under anyone who thought they were superior, he still deserved a certain amount of respect for his title. Tsunade Senju, their female teammate, was the last of the three. She was credited with the establishment of the Medical Ninja Training Center and had been the driving force behind the idea of sending teams out with a medic in the field. She was renowned for a technique that gave her incredible strength, on par with the final level of the rally and the lower levels of the X-Rally. Naruto knew she was a master medic as well. The fact that she could heal herself while fighting was a huge help to her. At his current level, Naruto could at least exhaust the great Tsunade, but if she relied on the summoning of the slugs for which she had a contract, he would be finished because he was not yet more integrated with the members of the Horse clan. The only thing that worried Naruto was why the only person still loyal to Konoha was in the Sandame's office and why he was somehow trying to trick the blonde into believing he was being ignored while the hermit was studying him out of the corner of his eye. Naruto was not stupid. Even when he was acting foolish, he would never have gotten into a confrontation with one of the great three summoners of Konoha. Assuming he would comply, Naruto bowed to the Sandame and stood opposite the elderly man in a position of attention. Naruto Uzumaki returned from Sandame Sama, the capital, present to provide mission report and next orders. The blonde got up and turned to face the Sanin, who was also staring at him and felt as though he were being watched closely. "All right, Naruto-kun, tell me about your encounter with the daimyo." The elderly monkey inquired because he was unaware of what had transpired between the two and hoped to find out from the blonde. The blonde, who only told him about his second encounter with the daimyo, said, "Fairly of importance to my future Sandame. Sama, he was telling that when the village let me go, I was more than welcome to join as an officer in his imperial forces. He would keep the other encounters secret until he felt it was safe to do so." He turned as the Sandame was listening to the boy's report and the travels throughout the city with a smile, and Jiraiya had to admit it was startling. The boy and his father looked remarkably alike, with different outfits and whisker marks, but they had the same look when they were discussing business. He nodded and said, "Naruto-kun, you are free to go. Jiraiya-kun, you yourself are free to quest after your own endeavors." Both of them responded with a slight bow, and Naruto left by door, Jiraiya via Shushin. Naruto was silent as he processed the information after completing his mission. On the opposite side of the village at the hot springs. After a genuinely soothing soak, Naruto was leaving the hot springs and heading to Training Ground 98, which was presumably the best place to train his body and his offensive skills. He didn't realize the white-haired man was peeking over a fence until he passed it and turned around. "What are you doing, Jiraiya-san?" he asked, not really believing what he was seeing. The Sanin said, "Researching, brat." "What are they researching?" He jotted something down in a notebook and said, "My next book of my series. After all, my public gets kind of upset if they don't get their new installations on time." Naruto sighed as he approached the perverted Sanin and grabbed the back of his vest, causing the Sanin to turn back to face him before he waved his hand and an armored toad materialized to swat him back. Naruto scowled a little as he watched the Sanin goggle at girls from behind a board and get a little nosebleed. With a wince from the Sanin who had witnessed it all, Naruto flew like a bag of potatoes, colliding with a refreshment stand and sending it toppling down on top of him. He shrugged and returned to his research. After brushing himself off and repositioning his shoulder, Naruto came out of the stand, checking the man and Gurren Sensei and hearing his Oni side demand the man's blood. When he saw that they were okay, he turned to the toad and frowned at its smile. He removed his quiver and bow, threw his haori over them to hide them from view, and then rushed in the direction of the toad. The blonde had thrust kicked where he was and completely destroyed the tree next to him. Jiraiya was approaching a good spot for his research when he felt the toad leap away. He looked down to see the toad was nursing a bruise on its stomach, and Jiraiya jumped off just as it dispersed. The blonde had swung the okatana of his parallel with his neck, and Jiraiya ducked down and consciously started to form a Rasengan, but he stopped himself and just threw a haymaker at the blonde, who ducked by backflipping away and sheathing his sword. Jiraiya grinned and waved his index finger as if reprimanding the boy. "It's not very sporty to attack an unarmed man with a weapon. Does the little samurai lack honor by not depending on his own skills?" Jiraiya's statement effectively infuriated the blonde. Naruto snarled as he threw both swords away, allowing them to land on his haori, and then he assumed his stance, placing his legs shoulder-width apart, his right hand's fingers curled into a claw-like imitation, and his left hand open palmed and level with his chin down. Uncertain of the stance's origin, Jiraiya assumed that the blonde was only proficient with swords because he had never alluded to anything else. He reasoned that the best course of action would be to strike him hard before he could hit him. As he watched the Sanin leap forward and perform a sliding trip, Naruto felt at ease, as only someone who had perfected a posture could, but he was unlucky that Naruto jumped over the pervert, used the back of his head as a springboard, and immediately flipped back into his starting position. "Now I will turn your son into a truly strong ninja. Think of it as an apology for not being here to help against the Fox Minato," Jiraiya said, standing up a little dazed from that last move and turning to see the blonde barely perspiring from the fight. He grinned and stood, applauding the blonde's skill. "You're good, Gaki. I shouldn't have been shocked, but I didn't anticipate you being so talented. Okay, I've made the decision to enroll you as a student. What about an early Christmas?" The blonde had assumed the fight was over and was gathering his equipment when Jiraiya spoke. "I regret having to turn down your offer, but if you really want your abilities to be passed down to future generations, I can direct you to the group that has a future cage for this village." As he turned to go, Jiraiya appeared in front of him. "If not, I wish you luck in your hunt for an apprentice and ask that you stop snooping on women in my presence or I will be forced to make it that visuals are the closest you will ever be to the real thing," he said. "Hold on, child, I can teach you some skills that will make people shudder." Naruto gave the pervert a chilly look and replied, "After all, I taught the fourth Hokage everything he knows. I take it you'd teach me ninja skills?" He nods. Jiraiya simply waved the fact away as the blonde said, "How would that seem fair as I am a samurai?" "The solution is straightforward." Jiraiya was stopped when he sensed a radiating cold from the boy. He looked and saw something that alarmed him. "You just throw away that useless idea of being a samurai and you can learn everything I can teach you." When the blonde looked up at him, Jiraiya noticed that his eyes were fading in and out so quickly that it appeared as though he had no pupils at all. He began to release his Oni side until he heard the sound of a raindrop falling into water echo through his mind and he calmed down to a level that would allow him to think clearly. The blonde was radiating killing intent to the point where even Jiraiya started to doubt that this was such a brilliant idea. Gurren observed all that transpired and prayed in private to Kami not to despise the unfortunate person who was going to enter her realm. "In order to boost your ego and give you the ability to brag, you think that I would alter my life goals in order to acquire some fancy little skills that I don't want? You're mistaken, sir. I'll go now. I'm not interested in your offers, and I don't need another purported ninja sensei. Goodbye." The blonde turned to go, but the Sanin asked him to wait. "Come on, I'm sure I have something you'd like to learn. After all, I taught the fourth. Is there anything else you think I could teach you?" Gurren Sensei taught Naruto to be diplomatic, Shinobu. Time to give people second chances, and Cayenne. Time to kill any perverts, burn them to ashes, and then use their ashes as fertilizer for his greenhouse. Naruto sighed as he looked at the man. All right, you have 5 chances to teach me a technique that I might need in life. If you are unable to do so, I will take away 1 finger for each additional opportunity you desire and forcefully feed it to you. These are my requirements. If you are unable to meet them, I will return to my training. If you are interested in me again, no toad, regardless of size, will spare you from an early demise. Got it? Jiraiya grinned, assuming he was kidding. However, anyone who knew Naruto would tell you that he never made joke threats. Instead, he only made threats that he could carry out. Training Area 98. As Jiraiya got ready for his first attempt, Naruto sat on a rock and hurriedly bit his thumb, performed 3 hand seals, and exclaimed, Kachiyose no Jutsu. A frog with a huge pipe, the kanji for boss, on the back of his coat, and a tanto at his waist was standing in front of Naruto. He looked down at the two and started to rant about why he had been called. I can teach you how to call forth toads using the summoning technique. Since Minato had jumped at the chance, Jiraiya thought the challenge was already won. They're great in battle after all, she said. I don't need your tiny hand seals, and my method of ninja summoning is far superior. Next. Jiraiya expressed his disapproval of this until Naruto's hand began to glow and the area behind him was crowded with various types of horses. The smallest was a young colt, and the largest was 6 feet taller than Jiraiya. Naruto looked at the largest as he stepped forward. He was a gray-skinned horse with black hair and tail that was speckled with red blood, like specks. The hair was adorned with numerous beads and ornaments, the smallest being a silver coin and the largest being a bandana. Are you treating our summoner disrespectfully? Jiraiya shook his head until Gamabunta, the larger toad, looked down at the group and snorted at them, drawing glares from numerous horses. The gray horse said, breathing blue flames from his nostrils. You called me to a rodeo, Jiraiya? The ground turned to sand and Gamabunta was buried to eye level as all of the horses abruptly turned to face the toad boss and stood on their back legs and lowered their feet simultaneously. Just as Jiraiya sent Gamabunta back to the summon realm, the tall one said, Fat Frog speaks with much disrespect, considering we were a full clan when your forefathers were just a bunch of tadpoles, you bastard. With a nod, the horses all disappeared in a flurry of hues, and Naruto turned back to face the gaping pervert. Time for you second try, I think, the blonde said, while Jiraiya nodded and continued to make hand gestures. Ninpo. Harijizo. As the pervert's hair grew longer and encircled him like a shield, Naruto watched. Jiraiya remarked, My Harijizo is the perfect shield, no one can get past it. Naruto then proceeded to grab a side and pull it open, leaving a right cross on the Sanin, which caused the technique to go awry and left Naruto standing there with a bleeding hand. There is no offense or defense that is flawless. You simply haven't found anyone who will make the extra effort to destroy it if you believe it to be flawless. As Jiraiya swore and got to her feet, he remarked, I am not half your age, and I am aware of this. All right, how's this? Doden. The underworld swamp. As the ground turned to mud and he started to sink, Naruto looked down, sighed, and attempted to pull his foot up but found it too difficult. The Gamma Senin was shocked when he saw Naruto glow brightly and was released. He laughed as he said, Not so cocky now are you. I can increase the pressure and suction with my chakra, admitted you finished. Jiraiya cursed, threw a smoke bomb, and vanished, leaving nothing behind. Naruto brushed the smoke from his face, but he saw nothing at all. Next try. Please hurry, I do want to train before nightfall. So, are you able to locate me? Yes, this one is unbeatable. I use it for both reconnaissance and stealth. I am totally hidden from you, am I not? Naruto grabbed Jiraiya by the throat and held him there until his windpipe cracked, cutting off Jiraiya's speech. As soon as Naruto pulled out his knife, Jiraiya emerged, growling and watching the blonde sit back on the rock, waiting for him to attack. Come out or I will cut randomly at what I think is your happy place. Now is the perfect moment to use Rasengan, one of the 2 original 4th techniques, to the fullest. He charged the boulder and slammed it into it, causing the great stone to shake, and then it just stopped. Naruto sat on the boulder and watched as the Sanin focused a lot of energy on his palm, first spinning a single string of chakra, then multiplying that by 4 until the entire thing was a randomly spinning ball of violently circulating energy. Naruto hopped down and looked at it. His eyes grew wide as he saw the final product, a precisely cut groove gouged out of the boulder, matching the outcome he achieved when he employed his special offensive technique. Brat, what are your thoughts on that? As he huffed for breath after expelling so much chakra, the man watched the blonde examine it. The blonde shrugged and turned to face the pervert. It's pretty and very showy, But even with one of your incredibly strong fourth's tactics, you haven't even shifted me an inch to your side. Therefore, if you want to try again, I'll start with your left thumb." Jiraiya paled as he leapt away, surprised that the boy wasn't impressed by any technique other than his own. He growled, held up his hand, and commanded the boy to stop. "You're telling me that even if you learned and applied every technique in the world, you wouldn't become a ninja? What's the matter with you, boy? You lack common sense. There's a reason why being a samurai is a dead occupation. Most of them have been eliminated by the ninjas. What do you say about the fact that you will be killed if you continue in this line of work?" In an attempt to instill some common sense in his beloved student's son, Jiraiya said, "No one, including myself, lives forever. Even if ninjas are trying to eliminate me, they have no reason to adopt a ninja lifestyle, so if I die, it won't be before my time. It is nothing more than a group of hungry dogs chasing and biting one another. For the sake of myself and the people I care about, I will not dance around like a puppet for idiots who won't take on an opponent head on. They bow to the person with the biggest bone. One of two things will happen to me when I leave this shithole of a village. Either the Sandaime dies, or my alleged teammates turn into Chunin. Given how much the council goes out of its way for one of them, it should happen soon. Minato, how do I help your son? He will be killed sooner or later. His spirit won't endure all of this and what his future holds." Jiraiya simply stood there, mentally cringing from the tongue lashing he had received from the blonde, and he shook his head. "You are a fool and a pervert, and I have nothing more to say to you." The blonde turned and started to leave. "Although I will refer to you as Jiraiya Sensei out of respect for your position." Jiraiya watched the blonde stop and turn to face him. "I'm hoping you can teach me something that has nothing to do with taijutsu, genjutsu, or ninjutsu." He turned and then glanced at him over the other shoulder. "Perhaps something about the places you have been and the traditions of those places. After all, I need information if I am to reach my goal. About the Rasengan technique, I have no interest in learning it. After all, I created my own maneuver based off it. Only difference between the techniques is..." Eagerly awaiting the blonde's response, Jiraiya leaned forward. Naruto nodded and spoke. "Once my method is perfected, I will be able to reduce anything as large as the Hokage monument to a pile of debris no higher than your knees." Jiraiya turned to the monument after giving the blonde a horrified look as he left. "Dear Kami, something that can turn that into rubble. I find myself wondering how he manages to function without ninjutsu. Whether Fourth's legacy or not, I believe that boy will alter the elemental nations if Konoha ever betrays him." Jiraiya couldn't help but shiver when the blonde broke the news to him. It was more like a promise than just a simple telling. Sitting in his office, the Sandaime studied a sheet of paper that contained information about Naruto's response to the daimyo's revelation. Even with his crystal ball, he was so naive to believe he could see everything the blonde went through. Now that he was aware of his parents, the blonde refused to interact with them. Unaware that the Anbu who watched over his office were still there as usual, Sarutobi sighed deeply and placed the paper down on his desk. Although they were unaware of the contents of the paper, it was clear that their Lord Cage was impacted in some way. Sarutobi had never appeared older than he did at that moment. He was aware that the least he could do was to give the boy an explanation of why he had chosen to conceal their identities. The Anbu pair exchanged glances and nodded before preparing to depart. "Anbu, please leave. You are dismissed for the time being." The two Anbu then bowed low and disappeared by leaf shushin, saying, "As you wish, Hokage Sama." Sarutobi took out a small scroll from his desk drawer and examined it. With a sigh, he unfolded it and positioned it so that he wouldn't need to make adjustments every few minutes. After that, he grabbed his ink brush and started writing late into the night. At the home of Naruto, while sitting in his kitchen, Naruto studied the reports of ninjas going missing in the Land of Tears. As soon as he left the village, he intended to flee to the location. It was mountainous, it was almost raining, it led directly to the coast, and it sounded very alluring. He picked up a map and pushed aside another sheet, making a note on it with a red pencil before returning to his papers, oblivious to the clock on top of the refrigerator. After taking a sip of his coffee, he carried on with his planning. He had no idea that the figure in the doorway was observing him. Shinobu was still awake after he had woken up when the chime sounded. He came here and threw himself into everything that needed to be done after meeting that white-haired man earlier today. The bookshelves, dishes, and house were all cleaned. He was using the maps he had and sharpening their sealed states. As far as she knew, he had not slept any. She was starting to worry about their master and herself, but she couldn't think of him that way because he was still very skeptical of the idea of love, which was made even more evident by their trip to the capital. After shaking her head, she went into the living room to look at the moon. Naruto heard footsteps coming from the hallway behind him and looked up from his planning. Shutting his eyes, he triggered his bloodline and listened to the noises. It's not an assassin because the creak indicates that the footsteps are too light to be an armed combatant. It's not a burglar because there isn't a brief enough pause in between the steps. Naruto got up from the table and turned to face the lone swinging light bulb. No wind's chill, so they didn't break in means that they were here before, so it's one of the sisters or Gurren Sensei. Then he went out to find out who it was. Naruto discovered his cunning tenant standing in the sitting room doorway. Sitting by the window, Shinobu looked out at the half moon that was glowing. Naruto couldn't help but be in awe of her beauty as she was surrounded by light. Shinobu was humming quietly to herself and was not aware that her wielder was standing in the doorway. The hum was the sound of her and Naruto Kun's first actual battle together. As though she had just finished, she completed it with impeccable grace and accuracy. Her thoughts kept returning to her master as she gazed down at the window sill. She turned to see her master silently approaching her before he paused and sank into a cross-legged sitting position next to her. Couldn't sleep, Shinobu? Hime? She asked. She looked at him, and he looked out at the moon. I don't know what is different, but I can feel it has changed, whatever it is. Naruto nodded while he gazed at the moon. No, I couldn't, it seems so different. She looked at the restriction seals, which were visible against his pale skin as he ran a bare hand through his hair. They danced up along his arm as though they were following one another. In order to help him remember events that had happened, he had a number of smaller tattoos placed throughout his body. She could also see the scars. She knew that the majority had resulted from his constant training to become a better person, but the burns were caused by the villagers. Her mind wandered as she stared in awe at the discoloration. Despite everything that has happened to him, including his mother abandoning him, the villagers accusing him, and his teachers mocking him, he continues to stand. A real testament to people's capacity for forgiveness and fortitude. Shinobu. Hime, are you alright? She asked, turning to face him and noticing the anxiety and concern written there. He got up, and she nodded. He extended his hand and she glanced up at him. She grinned and took his hand as he helped her up, and they went to the closet where he put on his haori and she did the same. Let's go for a walk, it has been so long since we have been alone properly. Then they walked out the door and beyond the gate into the now quiet village and the night. With Shinobu walking next to him, Naruto strolled slowly, relishing the feeling of his bare feet on the cool street dirt. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath of the cool breeze. He cherished this aspect of the location. It was just another village during the day, but after midnight it was his. Just peace, no looks, no threats. Naruto wasn't entirely in line with his more vicious side because he liked peace. He hopped forward, performed a few cartwheels, and smiled. Shinobu observed her master's apparent transformation from the always solemn swordsman to the person she adored. She had attempted, but failed, to persuade herself that it wasn't love. When she discovered they were so compatible, both in and out of combat, she fell in love with him. She couldn't help but smile as she gazed at him once more, captivated by his aura of tranquility and joy. She laughed when he landed on his ass. Naruto's heart leapt when he turned to face Shinobu and saw her smile. It appeared to have wings and taken to the air. When she came to him, he stood up and grasped her hand. She grinned as he guided her through the winding streets and grounds to a location he was familiar with, saying, "Come with me, I want to show you my favorite place in the entire village." Naruto released her hand and threw out his arms, causing them to stop. She noticed a huge bonsai tree encircled by an actual field of blue moon lilies. Naruto led her to the middle of the clearing, where he flopped down and she caught her breath. Moving to sit with him, she did the same. She inquired, "What is this place?" Naruto grinned while pointing out the distant mountains of debris. His finger indicated things, and she followed it. "We're in the older part of the village. This is where the clans originally lived when the village was founded. The Hyuga and the Senju are the only ones that still have a home here. This place was where they were going to build the Hokage Tower, but the developers chose the center as an easier access point. Now no one cares about it. The Senju are practically wiped out and the Hyuga won't come anywhere near here. This is the only part of this sector that was not destroyed by the Nine Tails," he said as he got up and scooted toward him. As he removed his haori and draped it over her, she nodded and asked, "Cold?" Then he took his long arms and put them around her, sitting behind her. She laid her head on his shoulder and let out a soft sigh. She simply snuggled closer to him as he raised and lowered his arms to warm her up. She didn't respond as he held her closer. "Shinobu? If we hadn't met that night, I would have died. I owe my life to you, Shinobu. Even if it is painful, you stopped it from ending, you and Cayenne." Shinobu glanced over her right shoulder at the blonde's head without responding. She couldn't think of a way to express her gratitude, but she knew he was trying. She decided to follow her instincts and put her lips to his cheek in a way that would make her younger sister proud. When Naruto turned to face Shinobu and saw what she had just done, he tensed up. He was partially enthralled by her beauty and experienced a battle of emotions as he gazed at her. Then he stepped forward and returned the kiss on her cheek. His retaliation astounded Shinobu, who turned to see him staring at her. Her gaze returned to his deep blue eyes. They resembled twin northern stars in their beauty. He moved at the last second, so she leaned over and kissed his chin this time. She pouted a little, and Naruto grinned while holding her closer. Taking this as a cue to proceed, she made another attempt at his lips and was successful. Savoring his smoothness, she held them together tenderly. Naruto was barely experienced in such actions, so he was unsure of what to do. He felt Shinobu's tongue warming up and gesturing for him to open his mouth, which he did, and Shinobu took charge. She gave him a gentle kiss, enjoying the opportunity to finally express her feelings. If his tightening of his hold on her was any indication, he was also enjoying this. The blonde's senses went reeling as she tried something and groaned into his mouth. He was getting a little better as they went along, but Naruto only broke the kiss to better position his hold on her. He then held her in a tighter embrace while he allowed her to continue kissing. Then, as she kept telling him how much she loved him, Naruto leaned back and pulled her onto him. The moon, which hung high above them and was the only observer of the blossoming passion between the two, was surrounded by a sea of blue moon lilies and the tall bonsai as they continued their act of love. The following morning, Shinobu was sleeping in her bed when Naruto checked on her. He had carried her home after she had dozed off at his place. She really was a boon to him. Taking a final glance at her, he shut the door. Gurren Sensei was already in the kitchen, reading his newspaper and sipping coffee from a saucer when Naruto turned to go down the hall. With a raised eyebrow, the turtle said, "Good morning, Sensei. What would you like for breakfast?" He tested what he had learned during his stay by saying, "I am fine for now, perhaps later, brat." Gurren watched a whistling blonde leave the kitchen and then scratched his head, saying, "Okay, I am going into the village to get some stuff for when the sisters wake up. They will probably be hungry." He said, "Did I miss something?" To no one. Naruto was on his way to the grocery store, halfway down the main street. He was so upbeat this morning that he wasn't even put off by the villagers. As he went on, he was soaked by a bucket of mop water. As he wiped his face, he turned to see an elderly woman grinning evilly at him. The woman thought he had gone crazy and fled back into her home when he said, "Good morning, would you like me to wait here as you empty any more buckets?" Ignoring the unexpected shower, Naruto simply laughed and shook his head like a dog before making his way to the grocery store. The clerk waved back languidly when he said, "Hi," to her when he got to the grocery store. He picked up a loaf of bread, a tin of sardines, bacon, ham, eggs, milk, and various cheeses as he went down the aisles. After giving the clerk his money, he headed home. Someone called out to him as he was carrying his bags. Shibi Aburame was approaching him when he turned around. He was holding a bamboo cage containing a vivid purple and crimson beetle. The blonde said, "Good morning, Shibi-san," as he began to follow the Bugmaster's steps. "Good morning, Naruto-san. I heard you went to the capital, am I correct?" Naruto nodded and explained his journey, including why he was there and how he returned. "You seem to be in bright spirits today, considering that you did not make the Chunin exam finals." With a sigh, Naruto reiterated that he was not a ninja and did not compete in the finals. After apologizing, Shibi carried on with his delivery. When Naruto finally made it to his house, he was constantly looking over his shoulder. After stretching, he started preparing breakfast for everyone. You all know what I mean when I say that Shinobu woke up to the aroma of something delicious coming from the kitchen. She turned to see that her sister and sensei were enjoying omelets, and that another was waiting for her. She looked back at her partner. He had no bags under his eyes this morning, and he looked good. Something that appeared to be mud was used to wash his hair. As he pulled her chair out for her and rushed into the shower to take a long bath, she thought about this in silence. After 2 hours, the sisters blushed as Naruto came out of the bathroom while he was drying his hair. One was significantly redder than the other. To his surprise, there was a bird on his windowsill when he entered his room. The rough brown paper fell from it as he held it on his finger. "My attractive ninja, I promise to see you again, and we are coming to the village today to buy and sell goods. At 2 o'clock, please meet me in the market sector of the town square. I'll see you then. Love, shake it." Lena. After scratching his head and putting on his clothes, Naruto headed to the training grounds in hopes of finding a spar that would be worthwhile and provide him with some exercise. He blushed as Shinobu gave him a hug and waved the girls off. Cayenne raised an eyebrow at the two of them. While strolling around Training Ground 15, Naruto came across two individuals who could spoil his good day: Captain Duck, with his all-powerful ability to bitch to the council, and the Harpy from Hell, also known as Sakura and Sasuke. Unfortunately, they noticed him as he turned to try to leave. Naruto looked deadpan and calmly considered killing the prick until the banshee's cry robbed him of all rational thought. "Hey Dobi, you're back. Pity I thought you got yourself killed. Oh well, I can hope for the future." Naruto glanced at her and opened his mouth to say, "Yeah, why didn't you ever come to help Sasuke-kun train? After all, he is the only one of us who got to the third exam." The Uchiha interrupted him. Naruto lifted a finger to respond. "What's wrong, Dobi? Were you scared to see how strong I had gotten under Kakashi's private tutelage?" But Sakura's voice broke through the mind once more. Naruto started to say, "Yeah, you're just afraid Sasuke-kun is stronger than you. He was training so hard he tore his other clothes to ribbons." Then he stopped himself and turned to face Sasuke's new outfit, which made him laugh so hard that he fell on his ass. Sasuke's Chunin exam outfit. The two were about to grip him again as they stared at him, but Naruto stopped them with a hand gesture. "Hold on, Uchiha-san. I'm assuming you're going to say something like, taijutsu and ninjutsu may break your bones, but whips and chains excite you." Naruto collapsed onto his stomach, laughing uncontrollably. After glancing at his attire, Sasuke swore at the blonde who was making fun of him. He was going to take revenge for the remark, but Sasuke got there first. When she said, "It is a sneaking suit, you baka. All ninjas have one, even I do." Naruto stopped laughing and turned to face Sasuke. The blonde collapsed as he laughed more. "You mean to tell me that all those buckles and clasps are to help you look less noticeable than usual? Oh, that is funny." As the blonde persisted in taunting him, Sasuke became agitated. Abruptly, he had an idea and spoke up. Naruto's laughter died in his throat, and his usual manner returned with a vengeance. "Yeah, what would I expect from a parentless weak coward?" he asked. With a killing intent on par with that insane snake guy they battled in the Forest of Death, Naruto asked, "What did you say, Uchiha?" Naruto turned to face the Uchiha and gave him a brief warning, saying, "I told the truth. Your parents had you and then abandoned you. You're a coward who fled to another profession because he couldn't stand up to grade a shinobi, and you're a weakling without your swords." Sakura laughed as the Uchiha sneered, "Don't test me, Uchiha, or you'll discover why samurai are feared even when they are unarmed." Tightening his eyes, Naruto resisted the urge to rip the lower half of the banshee's jaw off and kick the Uchiha in his happy place. In an attempt to provoke the blonde into fighting him, Sasuke grinned and said, "Okay, we'll see, won't we, Uchiha? Right here right now. Your ninja techniques against me and anything I could possibly do." The prick said, "Let's do this." Naruto simply strolled across the clearing. It started when Sakura threw a shuriken between them after standing between them. Start song. Prayer, by Disturbed. With the speed he had developed through training, Sasuke charged at the blonde, landing an uppercut that sent him flying. The blonde, however, righted himself and flipped back into a ready position. His mouth spit a tooth across the clearing, and Sasuke grinned. Once more, he charged. This time, Naruto was prepared. Sasuke attempted a sidekick, but Naruto grabbed it and pressed his elbow into the Uchiha's abdomen. Sasuke rolled backward. Sasuke charged once more as Naruto stood and flexed his hands. This time, he threw shuriken, and Naruto simply rolled under them. He prevented the Uchiha from using a fireball to barbecue him by using a tree root as a break. This time, Naruto charged, caught the Uchiha by the collar, and slammed his face into the ground. Then, with a loud crack and Sakura's whine, he grabbed his leg and swung him face first into a tree. After waking up somewhat dazed from the previous one, Sasuke was punched in the stomach and staggered back, but Naruto grabbed his face and gave it 2 knee slams. Naruto pursued Sasuke as he flew backwards. Sasuke attempted to throw a kunai, but Naruto grabbed it out of the air and used it to stab the Uchiha in the arm before giving him a helicopter kick to the head. Naruto sent him straight back into the air with a rising star kick to his happy place just as he was about to hit the ground. Sakura was about to stop the match when Sasuke slammed down hard, but she had to jump out of the way of one of the shurikens that had been thrown earlier and was aimed at her head. Naruto strode over to the Avenger and raised him up. He then gave him a hammer kick to the Uchiha's babymaker and soft spot while maintaining eye contact. Naruto broke a branch off the tree closest to them and swung it through the air several times, making Sasuke cringe on the ground and wishing he had something more resilient. When Sasuke saw the blonde stalking toward him, he opened one black eye. He attempted to move, but the agony was too great. When he saw Sakura throw a kunai at the blonde, he snapped the tree limb over the pink-haired girl's head. Then, he approached Sasuke and raised him once more while grasping him with his left hand. Sasuke turned to his right in terror. Sasuke was launched through the trees of Training Ground 15 with a terrible cracking sound. When he was unarmed, he was simply relieved that he had gotten the blonde. As a body rolled into their area, Team Guy was in training ground 17. They could hardly distinguish the boy from the wounds, but they knew it was Sasuke. They witnessed the blonde academy samurai advancing on the Uchiha heir. They sprang into action, Negi using Juken and Tenten using Kunai to attack. As Naruto picked up the Uchiha, he was unaware of both of them. When he saw Negi Juken him, he experienced shoulder pain. Behind him, Tenten had prepared kunais. Throwing the Uchiha back the way he came, the blonde snarled. They both widened their eyes at the blonde's voice as he walked away, saying, "Do you mind? We are sparring at the moment." They both hurried to get their sensei, hoping he could stop the crazy blonde. Sasuke was barely standing when Naruto waltzed into the clearing. Naruto flexed his muscles and continued to march in his direction, eventually gaining enough speed to make him a blur. Sasuke sensed pain all around him. When the blonde claimed that neither he nor Sakura posed a threat, he wasn't kidding. In fact, it's likely that this madman didn't even consider Itachi to be a threat. He wasn't the type to take a beating lightly. He created 2 shadow clones and sent them after the blonde after drawing his chakra for a final jutsu. Naruto halted when he noticed the bastard's weak clones charging. When they got to him, he literally beat the other to death with one before using him as a frisbee across the field. Naruto approached him and used his Sharingan as Sasuke watched. The blonde's body was covered in a layer that resembled a ghost, but it was taller and more ominous. Scarier than Itachi. Scarier than Itachi. Was Sasuke's final conscious thought. Gazing down at the battered and shattered Uchiha, Naruto smiled, likely making Kyuubi run for his mother. Then he exhaled deeply, and as his breathing slowed, he walked away. As Naruto was dismissing himself and leaving for home, his daily workout completed, he could feel the spirit shaking his head. Oni-san, remind me whenever I want to decimate someone, you're the demon to call, screw Kyuubi. When Naruto got home, his housemates were shocked to hear him whistling a song once more. Gurren asked the blonde, smeared with blood that wasn't his, Naruto-san, how are you feeling? The 2 questions and one blushed when Naruto nodded and said something. I love the weekends, it feels like my soul is free of everything. 2 of his students were critically ill in the hospital room, and Kakashi was standing outside the door. This occurred as a result of his failure to support them. Sakura was by far the better off. In addition to a minor skull fracture that had swelled to make her forehead even larger, she only suffered a minor concussion. To the dismay of all the medics and Anbu stationed close to the room, as well as himself, she continued to complain about the pain. He looked at his apprentice and his other pupil. Sasuke was a dream come true for field medics. There were 2 fractures in the skull, a dislocated eye socket, a broken nose, a snapped jawbone, and a central cut that ran from the top of his crown to his jugular. Regretfully, this was just the beginning for him and his fangirls. Fortunately, his ninjutsu and genjutsu skills were unaffected despite having 3 broken ribs and both of his shoulders dislocated. His right index and middle fingers had rotated 180 degrees. His appendix had been violently ruptured, causing severe internal damage to his stomach and possibly an infection. He also had a stab wound in the artery of his right arm. Additionally, he only had 1 nut because the other had been reduced to dust by the kicks that took place. Whoever beat him to within an inch of death hadn't done enough to damage those organs to prevent him from becoming a parent. Kakashi wondered who could do this as he peered out the window. At first, he thought about his blonde student, but he quickly forgot that his blonde student wouldn't purposefully prevent his teammate from taking the 3rd exam, would he? An hour from the border, 70 miles outside the village. Wearing only black silk pants and bandaging his feet and forearms, Naruto sat on a massive stone outcropping. He was waiting for his sensei to explain the first stage of sage training, and consequently the first stage of the actual art of sealing, while he sat in an Indian manner. As his sensei shrank to the size of an adult sea turtle, Naruto nodded that he understood. Naruto, you are here to continue your training. You have done well with everything till now, but from here on you will be tested to levels above and beyond anything you had possibly been able to reach, and if you fail the consequence will be terrible. He centered the green energy he used to attack Naruto as he stood in front of him. The first thing you must learn is to feel the natural energy around you. All the elements have a place in the world of the sage. One who masters these elements is truly a force to be reckoned with. The true master of these is known as the Sage of 6 Paths, but he has passed away, and his secrets with him. You will begin by trying to draw natural energy to you. Earth is the hardest for you as it is the opposite of your natural affinity, something that ninjas are surprisingly capable of contemplating. You will need to summon one summon aligned with each element to help you channel it. Palm is here to help you with that. The horse whinnied from the edge where it was eating oats from a pail. Naruto grinned until he was interrupted by Gurren. Sensei. Naruto, you must understand this. You cannot pause in any of the steps in your sage training or it will affect the end result and it could be disastrous. You also cannot train in these abilities for the risk of losing the experience you have gained, and never being able to recover from it. Do you understand? Naruto turned to his sensei and took a deep sigh. As sensei started drawing intricate seals on the ground, Naruto stood up and approached Palm, who indicated the precise level of chakra and gestured for him to try. Very well, Palm, tell him who he needs as I prepare his first lesson. When a huge statue of a horse appeared out of the ground, made of gray stone, Naruto thought he had made a mistake and was going to try again, but the horse flexed and moved. As it started to listen to Palm describe the situation in horse tongue, cracks appeared all over its stone body and it glowed an earthen brown. Until Gurren called out to him, Naruto simply watched the Doton horse figure flex and move around like any other real horse. Naruto nodded as he sat on the tri-arranged X's and sat down, not really prepared for what would happen. Okay, it's ready, Naruto. The last pieces of advice I can give you are to not fall too deep into meditation that you dream. If you do, you will have premonitions like before and the emotions that come with them could prove disastrous. Also, trust your summons. They're here to help you, and if you fail they lose their only summoner on this plane. Remember Naruto, your goal is to feel the earth. Earth is ancient and has many memories and it is all connected. You will achieve your level of desired ability when you can see through the earth and its many memories and use it as your guide in its domain. You must be trusting, but also wary. The earth can be enraged by disrespect and cause massive shifts that cause untold damage. Ninjas are fools to try and bend the elements to their wills. Only the elements and kami control them. Do not try to shape it or control it in any way. You must be led by it, much like that of a blind man. Are you ready, my student? Was Naruto prepared? He just sat there. He would have to be insane to attempt to get to this level. What was preventing him from giving up there and depending only on his strength and swordsmanship? These were not his thoughts, and Naruto halted as they raced through his head. Before his mental eye traveled through the sewers at a dizzying rate and focused on the fox, he closed his eyes and concentrated on the source. The fox appeared frightened, as though it was apprehensive about what would occur. It was trying to influence his choice by leaking its red yukai through the bars. The Kyuubi and his open mind were separated by a massive stone wall. As he tightened his hold on his mind, he closed his mental eye and returned to the present. The boy appeared to be beating his consciousness back to enable him to do this, and Gurren was observing him. He was thinking in private about everything he had done before leaving, including his night with Shinobu, his victory over his teammates, his tour of the village with Lena before his sensei dragged him away, and the Hokage's declaration that he wanted him to attend the third exam. Turning to face his sensei, Naruto nodded and uttered the words he wasn't entirely certain of. As a huge ball of gathered stones engulfed him and the Doton horse summoned, the great turtle nodded and stomped the ground, saying, "I think I'm ready, sensei." A huge hole appeared behind them, and they started to fall into it. Gurren and Palm simply watched as his pupil was flung into the depths of the earth. Naruto felt the summon in himself descending, and just as he was ready to escape, the summon intervened. They felt like they had slammed into something and started rolling, so Naruto stopped and nodded. Remember the turtle's warning, trust Mother Earth. After all, she has been watching over all of us since we were born. Nodding, the summoner said, "Thank you, my name is Naruto," and lay down beside him. As they collided with a wall from the left, Naruto nodded and said, "I know, my older brother Palm has told me of a new summoner of our clan who would partake in the trials of the sage. I am your companion for this trial, my name is Terrain." He was cut across the forehead and sent bucking forward. They continued rolling downhill into what they didn't know, and the horse nodded, saying, "Nice to meet you, Terrain. Let us pass this test together." Since his student's energy had been mingled with the vast channels of earth and energy, Gurren could no longer sense it and watched the whole. With a sigh, he faced Palm. The silent horse nodded solemnly as they sat down to wait for the blonde to return. "Kami, help them, Palm. They're going to need it to pass on," the horse said. After 2 days, his sensei threw Naruto into a huge stone ball, where he was still sitting. He would have assumed that they had stopped moving a few hours ago. It was too dark for him to see anything. The sphere smelled of Terrain's earthy coat, his sweat, and dried blood, and it had long since become a sauna. Naruto remained motionless. He sensed Terrain's serenity and attempted, with varying degrees of success, to replicate it. He tried to tap into the earth surrounding him after placing his hands on the outer shell and determining they had remained motionless for long enough. He was astounded by the numerous, harmonious vibrations he could sense through the stone, only occasionally disturbed by a sharp twang. He returned to what his sensei had taught him in his studies after attempting to concentrate but failing. You would be foolish to try to perceive earth as anything other than substance. This rule is broken by your Hyuga ninja clan, which is why they are so isolated. If they chose to ignore their eyes, they might find peace. In an attempt to center himself within the earth, Naruto closed his eyes and allowed this to whirl around in his mind. With great expectations, he reached out to receive nothing. If the other elements were as difficult as this, perhaps he wasn't suited to be a sage. He had tried everything he could think of, but the earth was still not responding. The truth hit him and he flinched. When it came to simply being himself, he was unable to do even the most basic thing. Listen to the damn vibrations that reverberated throughout the stone, despite having been raised by some of the most powerful beings he had ever encountered. As he considered that final thought, he paused and concentrated on it. Although the vibrations were constantly shifting and unique, they all coiled around a single core, one like a ball of yarn. He said softly, "And I am wrapped up in it." Terrain simply moved to acknowledge his presence. Naruto made another attempt as he felt the rock ball start to roll upwards once more while concentrating on the ground in his new frame of mind. He kept doing this until he reached a place where he heard the loudest vibrations and decided to try to decipher them. When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw that he was in a stunning area of the earth with mud pits, boulders, and a variety of other geological formations. He watched as a group of men appeared out of nowhere and started to rearrange things, moving trees over the mud pits to serve as bridges and crushing the stone to use in the construction of shops and a large tower with a rock symbol on it. As he watched it grow and produce in fast forward, with the earth being constantly broken up and disassembled for the village, Naruto declared, "This is the birth of Iwagakure." When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw that the earth was unhappy, that its natural areas were being distorted, and that people with a small amount of chakra were using force to control it. The orb in which he and Terrain had been stopped once more, and he sighed. Shutting his eyes, he attempted to observe once more. He saw two ninjas using Doden ninjutsu to battle one another. They were unable to hear the suffering they were causing to the ground they were standing on. The world's mother was suffering because of their stupidity, but they didn't care. He wanted to hear nothing else, so he could only hear it. He saw as a massive earthquake struck out of nowhere, engulfing the ninjas in the midst of their fight. Naruto sensed that the earth was at peace when it became quiet once more. When Naruto opened his eyes once more, he could feel the ball moving more quickly than before and that the heat that had been surrounding it had vanished. The earth's hospitality pleased him. At that moment, he understood that although he had been able to access the memories, he still needed to listen and see through it. Naruto then gently buried his hand in the soft soil and concentrated on his goal. The earth then gave off a tremendous pulse, which Naruto's consciousness followed until he reached a huge source of vibrations. "Great Earth, please allow me to view the village of Konohagakure." As the vibrations racking through the earth reached a location he recognized, Naruto sensed that Shinobu and Kyan were having a conversation about something, even though the vibrations only revealed two people in the house. As he focused more intently, he could hear them discussing his development. As Kyan teased her older sister about her crush on him, he listened and gradually withdrew his hand, losing the vibrations. Then he touched the stone with his hand and did what he had done before. "Great Earth, please carry me and my companion back to my sensei." Naruto heard the earth rumble and shift as the ball started to rise steadily. Terrain observed the young swordsman with approval. It appeared that his mother, the earth, had grown fond of him. His progress would be of great interest to his father. The ball then turned and stopped, and Naruto moved into the horse's side. Nearly 3 days ago, Gurren saw the ball roll out of the pit in which it had fallen. He was concerned because he could not hear any sounds coming from inside. With a mutter about his hindquarters falling asleep, Terrain stood as he walked over and tapped it, causing the stone to crumble and Naruto to roll out. The boy coughed up a lot of dust and spit, and Gurren looked down at him. After taking a few deep breaths, he turned to face his sensei. "Sensei," the turtle said with a nod. Naruto hit the ground and began snoring loudly, saying, "You sure know how to pick a way of learning something, but I passed and I need a nap before my next one." Gurren was fascinated by the boy. He had spent so much time on Earth that he believed he might have perished. That was untrue. He understood the idea and had made the most of it. That was quite an accomplishment, even if it did sap all of his energy. Terrain left to talk to his father and thank his mother for her understanding of the situation, and he nodded as he and Palm went to arrange where the next trial would be held. Because he could sleep until the world stopped, Naruto was unaware of the outside world. In the village, since the blonde had not been heard from for 3 days, Sarutobi sat at his desk worried, starting to believe that something had happened to him or, worse, that Orochimaru had somehow gotten hold of him. He hoped that was not true. The sisters were reading from a piece of paper that their sensei had persuaded a bird to deliver at the blonde's house, which stated that their master had survived the earthly trial with only minor wounds. They jumped up and danced around the house in celebration of their master's victory, ecstatic. The blonde had only met the person at a hotel in the middle of the village. He had searched for the blonde to murder him, but he was unsuccessful, which only made him more resentful. It was Gaara of the Suna. He only needed patience. He would murder the blonde. You can make a self. Promise that your mother, Uzumaki, will have your blood. 8 miles west of Kirigakure village in the land of mist. Naruto padded through the water while perched on his sensei's back. His next challenge was out here. Just as he had connected with the earth, he would do the same with the water. According to Sensei, he picked these two because they were the elders and had contributed to the creation of the world first. As Palm gestured for him to choose who he would call next, Naruto nodded as he finished and Sensei reached their destination. Naruto, you are out here to connect with Mother Ocean. She is of great importance to the world, but most sages approach her last only out of necessity. She has given some part of herself to every summon clan, and as such is a cause for her to have you respect. Naruto nodded to his sensei and called his companion for the test. Naruto, when you try to connect with water there is nothing you can do. You must allow her to see you in all retrospect, so you must allow her to reach you everywhere at once. There was a splash and a yell in a poof as well. Naruto turned to face Palm, who was crouching and hiding his head behind him to make himself less noticeable. Palm, you bastard, I am so going to kill you for interrupting my planning of our date, Naruto said, realizing that even with some strange good fortune, it was bound to fail. Naruto turned to see who was frightening one of his favorite summons. Palm, why are you trying to hide from me? I am so going to get you later for this, he said. Despite lacking the back legs of a horse, it was still a horse. Rather, it possessed a large fin that resembled the tail fin of a koi fish. He glanced over his shoulder at Palm. Palm simply shook his head, which made Naruto smile and Gurren laugh. How exactly did this work out, Palm? You got a half horse for a girlfriend? Palm asked. Naruto looked at her as she leapt out of the water and transformed into a full-bodied white palomino, which Palm is even more trying to hide. I am not a half horse, you insufferable jackass. I only have this edition when I am in contact with Mother Ocean, he said. I can understand Palm's fear. She terrifies me more than the Anko woman Shino mentioned. After shaking his head, Naruto questioned the sensei about how he was expected to finish the assignment. Naruto looked at his sensei as though he had gone insane, which would have been awful. Simple apprentice, you dive in and you reach the bottom. The turtle mumbled about unappreciative students and huffed, what happens after I drown exactly? Naruto nodded as the girl horse leapt into the water and changed. You will be in the hands of Mother Ocean. If you trust her and allow her to come to peace with you, you will reach the bottom and get back to the top before you run out of air. Palm averted his gaze as though he had noticed something shiny, but Naruto said, before we start, I would like to know who Palm has been blowing off my dates for. She snorted and answered, Naruto Hagenoisha Uzumaki at your service. Naruto bowed. Looking at the girl, Naruto thought, it's no wonder Palm always looks so dejected as he leaves. I wouldn't want to go anywhere with her either. Helena, Palm's fiancée, here to keep your human ass from drowning. Naruto nodded and dove into the water, saying, enough, a hurricane is coming, and unless you want to be sleeping in Mother Ocean's arms for eternity, it'd be best that we get a jump on this one. When he struck it, he instantly shivered because it was at least 40 degrees below freezing. He pushed it away and started to move toward the bottom, with Helena following him with languid tail swishes. He kept going farther and farther until there was no more light, and then all of a sudden Helena's tail's scales were shining on everything. As he dug deeper and deeper, Naruto thought, well, that is useful. The pressure that should have been on him was not as severe as he had anticipated, and he could feel the temperature dropping the lower he went. However, his lungs felt lifeless and shriveled because he had run out of air so long ago. Ignoring the pain, he dug deeper, having experienced worse. Helena watched as the alleged human descended with unfailing grace. She would pull him back to the surface since he was most likely out of breath by now and would soon become unconscious. As he dove once more, she did wonder why Terrain saw such potential in him and kept watching. Naruto paused and peered down, but he was unable to see the bottom. He was aware that he couldn't continue like this much longer. He also couldn't see it when he looked at the surface. When he turned to see Helena staring at him, a thought suddenly came to him. As the blonde gestured for her to pull him down as soon as he could, Helena smiled and swam alongside him, letting him climb on before she made a beeline for the bottom. Naruto grinned at his brilliant idea. They arrived at the bottom as Naruto's vision started to haze. As Helena leapt to her feet, he tightened his hold and retrieved a shell from the bottom as evidence. He felt himself losing his hold as Helena effortlessly swam away, despite his best efforts to combat the blackness that was creeping in from the corners of his eyes. He thought as he felt the coldness all around him. My prediction was incorrect. Instead of being killed by that man, I drowned while carrying the Kyuubi. Funny, in a kind of ironic way, huh? As he continued to slowly descend, Naruto thought, oh well, at least it's peaceful. When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw the Kyuubi looming over him, more accurately, a ghostly image, provided by his brain not getting enough oxygen. He could see that it was cursing him for his weakness and for letting him die so pitifully. Naruto merely waved and smiled at the insane fox as it rantingly threatened to find his soul in hell and devour him. He felt something bite his arm and pull him upward as he closed his eyes. Before I burn in hell, Kami must want to meet me. He laughed to himself at his small joke, letting water pour into his mouth and lungs. Oh well, I hope I don't drip water on the floors. In order to show that they couldn't break his spirit, he flashed his large, visible teeth in a smile. Gurren Sensei's shell appeared beneath his back as it soared toward the beach, and he felt the water disappear from all around him. As he passed out, Naruto only coughed up a small amount of water. In the dream of Naruto while standing on the ocean's surface, Naruto observed the hurricane destroying the coastline. He grinned as he watched buildings fly like arrows across the sky and crack and tumble. He watched with a smile as several fishing boats were sunk by another gust of wind. When Naruto turned around, he saw the fourth Hokage and a man who resembled him, including birthmarks, but was roughly 50 years older. So this is what my heir has become. As well as your son Minato. The fourth raised an eyebrow at him, and the matriarch nodded. Oh, I guess I can see dead people. Huh, it's not as funny to say as I actually find it true. Let me guess, I know the bastard in the flame-stamped trench coat. You must be, right, you must be Taishi, founder of my clan. As Naruto shook his head, the fourth asked, don't you mean one of your clan's son? You are an Uzumaki after all. The two looked at each other as Naruto turned back to the hurricane destroying the coastline and said, nope, I am only keeping the name till the third passes away and then I am off, but seeing as I am dead doesn't really matter, does it? Oh well, can't be helped. Minato reached out to embrace his son and stepped forward. Naruto snorted as the fourth twisted him around in a furious expression. You can't abandon your mother's clan name, it's a part of you just like she is. Naruto grinned as he looked up at the fourth and said, you don't understand, your mother and I are a part of you, you can't just lock us away and never use us. Minato glared at the boy who simply steadied his honor at his father until a halberd appeared between the two, an inch from either's face. Really, you and mom were ninja. I am a samurai, and I will protect my honor in any way I see fit, and it tells me to drop the both of you just like you did me. When they looked, they saw Taishi brandishing the weapon. Naruto smirked as the two exchanged glances. I won't allow the two sons of my clan to wage war against one another. No, we will settle this peacefully, or I will end it. Naruto pointed to the man holding his shoulders and said, sorry, Taishi-san, but I wasn't the one who resorted to violence. Minato released Taishi after he nodded. Naruto brushed off his shoulders as if they had been struck by something nefarious. Taishi watched passively, his halberd always at the ready, while Minato kept glaring at his son. Minato simply glared at the boy and drew a three-bladed kunai, which caused Taishi to raise an eyebrow. Now that you two are here, I am guessing there is something you want to tell me. Or did you just come to point and laugh at the stress relief toy you gave your oh-so-kind villagers? Minato asked. Taishi looked at the boy and sensed no demon aura, indicating that Minato was mistaken. He had fought demons in his day. You are not my son was a hero, and you were just the fox in his body. There was absolutely no Yukai moving through this boy, demonstrating any influence. Oh, there is something I haven't heard before. Oh look, it's the fox killed and finished the fourth Hokage's work. Ya right, great fourth Hokage. You just made two jutsus, the third, Naidame, and Showdown all made more than that in their sleep. Great, my ass. Minato saw the fox allegedly taunting him, but he also understood that Taishi had no significance as a demon. When he realized, the fourth went pale. As Naruto saw the man go pale, he verbally assaulted him once more. Yeah, now you see the greatness of yourself, don't you? I have met your teacher, and if you had continued learning under him instead of just stopping after signing the Toad contract, you might have become something honorable. Instead, you ran off into the shinobi war thinking that with only two jutsu you could change the tides, which you did admittedly, but only because the Sandaime was tired of killing, and you were the strongest only because you were the fastest. That's why you're the fourth Hokage, the Great Yellow Flash. You killed people so fast all they could see was your blonde hair. Yeah, some Hokage. I at least realized I couldn't do the name justice and changed my profession. You just showboated it and went around getting the support from the villagers. That's where we are different people, dear old dad. Was just staring at the boy relentlessly with these words that he had never supposedly thought of. The orphaned legacy of the Great Fourth was supposed to grow up and love a village that tried to kill him. Well, one problem, even I am not that blind. Naruto yelled as he started to leave, only to have the fourth throw the kunai at him. Naruto batted the thing away, but the fourth then appeared holding it in a yellow blur, and kicked him in the face, sending him flying across the water. Yeah, aren't I? It's entirely true, Naruto said. Minato was huffing from the force of the kick, hoping it would make his foolish son think, Minato, you should be ashamed of yourself. He is just a boy, even if he did say disrespectful things towards you, there is no reason to attack. Pulling himself out of the water, Naruto flexed his muscles and consciously activated his bloodline. This infuriated Minato because the bloodline had passed directly to his son, bypassing his generation. A red mass of chakra materialized in Naruto's hand, which he threw and used like a fireball as he growled and charged forward. As Minato dodges and flees towards his son with a Rasengan flaring into existence, Taishi batted the flames away from him. With a snort, Naruto made a last-minute move that broke his father's right wrist. In agony, Minato leapt back. This would not be a pretty situation. In his mental landscape, something was drawing on Kyuubi's chakra, and although it wasn't really traveling anywhere, rather, it was only moving to various parts of his body. It was noticeable enough to draw his attention. Wondering what was happening, Kyuubi went pale as the cage room trembled and he was hurled against the wall. He reabsorbed all of his chakra into his side of the seal, as he believed this to be the best course of action. In the dream, with his son standing above him, exuding crimson energy, Minato lay bleeding on the water. Although he had only had it activated for a brief time, he had caused immense harm during that time. He started kicking Minato's ass after totally destroying his speed advantage. As the boy fell to his knees and the cloak of Yukai dispersed, Minato was forming another Rasengan. Minato sighed. He was secure. Despite his son's increased strength, he was never able to match his Hiraishin's speed. The boy lay on the ground panting, still trying to fight, and he scowled as he walked there, his Rasengan shifting between levels. Naruto spat up the blood that was forming in his mouth and said, "Fox, you can't do this. Not now. I thought you would be glad I was trying to kill the man who had sealed you in me, instead." As the fourth continued to descend on the blonde, a deep voice echoed through the plain, "Even though I hate the ninja, I won't allow my power to be used by a son to kill his father. You will eventually thank me for this whelp. I am going to sleep." Naruto simply drew back his Rasengan and glared up at the man. The fourth merely stared at Naruto with disgust as he hacked a pool of blood onto his sandal, saying, "I will get you, father, hell or not I will find and make you pay for what you did to me. You can bet my soul on it. You are not worthy to be the son Kushina and I deserved. You truly were a mistake. Your only real use was to house the demon and protect your village. You mean your village bastard? They hated me enough to try and kill me. I hope your precious village is destroyed and I am there to laugh when it does. That's what a father like you deserves." Minato simply gazed down into his eyes at his bastard son's violent soul. With a fierce scowl on his face, he grabbed the boy by the collar. Taishi had long since been scattered because of their conflicts. He delivered his genuinely last blow by bringing his Rasengan closer to the boy's face. Naruto simply stared at the man in disbelief as the Rasengan tore through his head, thinking only of the agonizing pain and that he would cause that man to suffer in the afterlife. To think Kushina and I only had you for the sake of our daughter, Rekka so wanted a little brother to play with. It is good she is dead. I wouldn't have been able to stand showing her what her supposed little brother was like.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.